Good evening, and welcome to the October 8th meeting of the Livermore City Council. I now call the meeting to order. I'll let the roll call show that all members of the City Council are present and accounted for. With that, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, just to confirm from the city attorney that there was no reportable action taken in the closed session.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Just to say at the very beginning that 5.03 is going to be continued to another date. That's the disposition, development, and loan agreement with Eden Housing. So I'll be coming back at a future date. So if anybody's here for 5.03, take the night off. And with that, we have proclamations and presentations. That's going to be continued to a future meeting since Mr. Arnold was not able to make it to this one. And so now we move on to the Citizens Forum. This is these are items that are not on the agenda. The City Council can either take action or deliberate on something during the Citizens Forum. I do have a speaker card. It is for Caitlin Smith. She would wish to speak. Caitlin, so please come up to the podium and you can speak to the City Council.
I am doing a current event project this week about elections. I have to make a presentation Friday, and I wanted to tell my class about how elected people can become a mayor or a city council member. Thank you for letting me visit your meeting.
Well, thank you for coming, and certainly enjoy the meeting, and I hope that this answers a lot of questions for you. And of course, you know that you can contact any of us up here and be more than happy to talk with you about how all that works.
Thank you.
But it's all about paying attention to the community.
Okay.
And we work for the best interests. Well, great. Well, thank you very much. With that, I'm going to close the Citizens Forum. Oh, I'm sorry. There's more. I'm sorry. There were. She had it on a piece of paper, and there were cards hiding under it. So there, I thought we got through that awfully painlessly. All right, there we go. Okay, with that, we have David McGuigan, David Rounds, Victoria Cristobal.
I had quite a good chuckle the other day when I first saw one of your campaign posters for the first time, John Marchand. Proven leadership. Talk about your political exaggerations. What kind of leadership were you providing when you tried to shove that god-awful Lennard project down people's throats? What kind of leadership were you proving spending all that money on all those studies of the downtown only to ignore the results? I guess if you keep asking questions, maybe you'll finally get one that you like. I don't know. But what kind of leadership have you proven when, after all the money and all the studies and all these years, there is still no downtown project? That's not proven leadership. That's proven dysfunction. Now, on September 10th, I presented you with this photograph. And as you can see, it shows a skid mark in the middle of First Street at the crime scene location. I also showed you this official police photograph of the crime scene that shows absolutely no skid mark. Not the ones that are supposed to be there from the evidence or the one that was there 7 days earlier. Somehow, in the 7 days between these two photographs, when these two photographs were taken, the skid mark completely disappeared. Skid marks don't disappear without effort. And at a minimum, that effort had to be at least coordinated with the Livermore Police because they control the scene of the access to the scene. So, John Marchand, liar of Livermore, you have been presented with a serious accusation of felony evidence tampering by the Livermore Police, bolstered with photographic proof. What kind of leadership are you going to demonstrate? Will it be more the typical John Marchand deliberately lying and covering up things? Or will you show true leadership and consider this accusation truthfully and honestly?
David Rounds, Victoria Cristobal, and John Stein.
Good evening.
Last January, the council insisted that 130 units were required on the Lucky site. In April, Councilman Warner finally asked the city to provide evidence of its affordable housing obligation for the downtown development site. After many requests over 7 months, we have learned from the city attorney just last month that only 84 units are legally required to be placed on the downtown site. Shouldn't Bob Warner have known that number when he voted for 130 units in January? A West Side hotel was blocked because the 130 units filled the remaining open space between Livermore Avenue and L Street. Residents had supported the West Side Hotel 3-1 in the outreach process. Had there been an open council discussion, the housing units could have been reduced to 84 and easily placed on the periphery of the Lucky site. A 3-story, relaxed, wine-country West Side hotel could have been set back either a couple of stories behind Blacksmith Square or even further to the west. Stockman's Park could have proceeded as planned. This East Side hotel harms the community for 4 important reasons. It creates a seriously inadequate parking situation along Livermore Avenue, traffic congestion along Livermore Avenue and Railroad Avenue, housing that dominates the downtown center, and loss of a possibility of a continuous park from the Bankhead to L Street. Now that we finally have the facts on the amount of housing, the East Side plan should not go forward. Citizens deserve something better for the heart of our downtown. Thank you.
Can I ask staff a question?
Certainly.
I don't recall that the council ever insisted that we had to build 130 units. I don't recall ever being told there was a legal obligation to do that. I do recall a choice, but have we ever insisted that we had to build 130 units? There was anything forcing us to do that?
Not to my knowledge. The council balanced a number of different factors, including the funds that were used to purchase the site, the total amount of funds that would have to be repaid, the actual minimum legal requirements on the site, which were referred to by the earlier speaker, and all of the various uses that the public ultimately wanted to achieve, and came up with the plan that included 130 units.
And the other comment I would make is that those who have been paying attention to the history of what we've been doing for the last while is that there's 420 units, then the RFP was 260. As a result of the process a few years ago, Councilmember Spadowski proposed 130, and that's where the 130 number came from, no other source.
Okay, thank you. We have Victoria Cristobal, John Stein, Carl Wente.
Good evening. I'm Victoria Cristobal with Spectrum Community Services and the Meals on Wheels program.
A little closer to the mic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
It's an important message. Don't want to miss it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I want to give you a short report about Spectrum's Feed the Need fundraiser that took place in late September. As you remember, we had 80 people on our wait list for Meals on Wheels here in the Tri-Valley, and half of them here in Livermore. By the end of that night, we raised enough money to remove all but 5 of those seniors off the wait list. We are still reaching out to the community for the additional $12,000 needed to feed those 5 more seniors for the next year. A huge thank you goes out to Supervisor Scott Haggerty for his support of 64 seniors through Measure A Health Initiative funds. I'd also like to thank Mayor Marchand for his support and being with us the entire evening, including serving as one of our judges as our first ever Feed the Need Throwdown judge. It was a bunch of fun seeing how many lunches could be made in 3 minutes. And a huge thank you to our city commissioners, Marla Kirby and Marty Sutton, for their contribution to the Feed the Need event. All of this has created a great and good challenge for us, in that we now are in urgent need of 13 more volunteers to help us deliver this increase in number of seniors we are feeding each day. So we are pleased to invite anybody who is willing and open to the opportunity of delivering meals to the seniors in the community to go on our website at spectrumcs.org or call me at 925-483-1989. We look forward to having you join our team of volunteers, and we thank you again for your support.
And what was that website or the email and the phone number again?
Yes, you can go to spectrumcs.org, or you can call me at 925-483-1989. Thank you again.
And this is an extremely rewarding opportunity because I've actually done some of the lunch deliveries. And in some cases, you may be the only contact that individual has. And it's extremely rewarding because it really is a very, very bright spot in their day. So I would encourage anybody out there with a little bit of extra time to volunteer for the Meals on Wheels program.
Excellent.
So
Thank you for
all
that.
your
I
efforts.
appreciate it.
And that was a lot of fun. The gold lunch bag. That was excellent. John Stein, Carl Wente, Jacob Anderson.
John Stein, 1334 Cathy Court. At the last meeting, there was a question about, with all of the drought-related problems, whether, effective landscaping, large trees, would be appropriate for a large area of the downtown plan. A lot of the trees can survive on winter rains if there's enough open area to absorb the rain. And I would like to suggest when you design the pathways and open areas that rather than cement, you look into pavers or in some cases even gravel, bioswales, anything to trap as much of or capture as much of the rainfall that occurs during the winter months as possible. Second topic is the state has changed the law to give BART the rights essentially to plan areas within a half-mile of their stations and decide what the density should be, what the floor area ratios are, the height limits, the parking requirements, essentially giving them land use control. So apparently we definitely avoided a bullet. Can you imagine what would have happened if there were a downtown station? You wouldn't be worrying about a downtown plan, or at Isabel, you wouldn't worry about an Isabel plan. BART would take care of all of that for you. So that's one issue. The other issue is the county is now looking at solar farms in North Livermore rather than agriculture. And I would like the council to begin looking at the North Livermore plan. If you look through the South Livermore plan, you see all of the big billboards saying this land is protected in perpetuity, and that's because the plan essentially bought the easements. I don't see a single one of those signs in North Livermore. The city has been collecting funds now for almost 15 years. You've bought land on an earthquake fault, land around the water tower, and land at the far end of Doolin Canyon, but nothing in the central area of North Livermore. And perhaps now is the time to begin looking at acquiring a buffer to control at least some of the land. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Carl Wente, Jacob Anderson, and finally Jeff Caskey.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Bob's, staff, thank you all for what you do. Thank you for service, for going to work on behalf of this wonderful city. I have something hanging out in my pocket. My pants are ripped. I apologize. Again, the service, what you do, the time that you put into this job, I just thank you. Those in uniform, I salute you. I thank you for what you do to make this a safer place. Mark Roberts, keep doing a good job. Your staff continues to be awesome, answering questions, taking feedback, and actually listening. So Article 2, Section 9 provides that referendums can happen, and so each participant circulator per election code 9607 must have the signed statement. Backdating is not allowed, and this has been adjudicated by Assembly versus Duke-Majan in 1982. Further, each paid gatherer must have, per election code 6910 B and C, must have the signed statements prior to going out. Backdating is not allowed. Withdrawal is allowed anytime before they get in there. And then the election code prohibits circulators from misrepresenting the purpose or contents of the petition to potential signers. Election code 18600 through 18602. I was lied to multiple times by them folk out there. We can go down the list of 1 million square feet of hotel and retail. That's 22.957 acres. This plan will have no open space. They threw out the old plan, had no open space. You can sign this online. Referendums needed because people are not aware of the actual plan. This is to, it's not about downtown, but so much more. You're un-American if you don't sign. That's actually quoting over here, but so I didn't hear that one personally. There will be multiple hotels to be built, multiple parking structures built. These are all things I've told or seen on video. There'll be much more traffic and tourists, God forbid. The plan, everything must be a minimum of 4 stories. That was a lie, I was also told. Also, the Secretary of State website has all the information on this referendum. Don't think so. June 3rd, there will be a vote on this. There's going to be a motel. There'll be 2 movie theaters, and they're building another one. There's a golf course downtown, and they're putting in a skate park in the golf course downtown. You can get all of this information on StopUrbanSprawl.com. Ingrid is paying us. There's another one that said that Assistant District Attorney Katrina Fabian was also paying them to collect signatures. Been lied to. How do you go about taking that out? I don't know. Also, AB 362, September 2009. It makes it a misdemeanor to deface signs out there. And if you do it a second time, it's 1 year in county and a $2,000 fine. So people are breaking the law out there, fundamentally breaking the law out there. I'm not totally sure what to do about it, but it just doesn't sit right in my core. You guys are doing a great job. Speaking as a person, an individual, my name is Carl Wente, and I strongly support the leadership of the incumbents that are running right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wente. Jacob Anderson and Jeff Caskey.
I actually don't have much to say. I think Carl said it pretty well. I am tired of the lies that are out there from the Friends of Livermore. It's saddening, and it is just straight up lies. I'm tired. It's no longer misleading. It's just lying. Have some integrity, please. Step up. Be morally right. You do have free speech. That's a great thing about our country. But please, have some integrity. With that, the council has done an amazing job on this plan and actually has made a lot of different concessions on the way to include a lot of different opinions. I remember Councilmember Carling saying, let's rearrange the housing to make sure that there is a linear open space, something that people were asking for. And it wasn't in the original plan. It wasn't in anybody's plan. And he said, you know what, people want this. Let's rearrange the housing to do this. You have listened to the people. And I continue to get amazed at the lies of people out there. And I am very thankful for a council that takes the time to listen to its constituents. And I please just beg you that you continue to do that. And I trust that you will, because I've seen nothing that tells me otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Finally, Jeff Caskey.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jeff Caskey. As one who has also been part of the downtown process for a number of years now, I guess I'd like to make one correction that Councilmember Spadowski did propose the 130. However, that was voted down by council. So the 130 actually has nothing to do with his proposal. That was voted down by a majority of the council. The 130 is not legally binding. That's correct. But the 130 was presented to us as the amount that it would take to counteract the $14 million debt that would have otherwise been need to be repaid on the property. The thing that we've been given recently is a pretty cool windfall by actually doing the work of going through that complicated bunch of documents to find out that the number is really 84, not 130 or some other number. The other numbers, by the way, the 420 and the 260, of course, are different plans and fun to quote, but not really relevant to what we're doing today. So 84 is now the new number. 84 is the number that we can build and not have to pay back that $14 million. That's a great windfall to the city of Livermore, to the people of Livermore. So what are we going to do with that windfall? We can ignore it and hand that windfall to the developer. That's an opportunity. We can use it to improve the current downtown plan. And we've heard proposal about moving the hotel to the west side. That's certainly one of the options. More open space. something that you can do with the downtown. Increase the size of the Stockman's Park. Relook at that space and say, what is it that we can do if the citizens have more space available to them? We talked about the linear park. Now we don't have as much space required for the housing. Can that linear park be increased? What are the things that we're going to do? Or are we going to change the spec but not change the final design? I think as a good engineer, some of you being engineers know better than that. When you change the spec, when you change what it is that you have to deliver, you get to go and look at what it is that you're going to deliver. Thanks very much.
I have a quick question for the city attorney. I think we have some confusion here. 130 units, does that satisfy the entire $14 million for the purchase of the site?
No, the 130 units would not. As I mentioned in my staff report, their affordable housing obligations is derived from two separate sources, one of which is a deed restriction on the property, which requires 84 units to be built. However, there's a separate obligation that is a result of the affordable housing fees, City of Livermore affordable housing fees that were paid into that project. If 130 units were built or 84 units were built, that would satisfy the deed restriction, and a portion of that could be counted towards the affordable housing obligation. But there's still funds that need to be repaid beyond that. 84 units would not satisfy $14 million.
I think there's another point, though, too. The 84 was divided in two different ways, right? Between 28 affordable units and 56 market rate units. Isn't that correct?
Affordable and very low.
Okay, affordable and very low. And what we're talking about here is different.
Yes.
Mix.
So
So you can't compare apples to oranges here.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to get to. People seem to be clued in on the 84. That's the deed restriction, but we still have funding that we need to account for out there, and that's what the 130 million does. So you either or the 130 units accounts for the remaining units. The 14 million is satisfied through a combination of the 130 units and units being moved off to the Stockman site. So it is not just 130 units suddenly takes care of the 14 million. So I'm confused as to where all the confusion is coming from, because your memo with the supporting documentation of accounting for all the housing costs was quite clear. 84 deed restricted, the rest of the units, the rest of the 130, the 50 or so remaining still need to be built to account for the money, or we find a source to pay that money back.
Yes, that is correct.
So can I try something here?
Sure.
So, yeah, I too was confused by the last statement. The more units that are built, the more the city gets credit. So saying that only having to build 84 is a windfall has got the sign wrong, right? That would say if we only had to build 0, that we'd have an even bigger windfall. That makes no sense. The point is, we have two factors here. One are the legal requirements, and the other is what makes financial sense. Those are distinct, okay? And that so the 130 did come from Councilman Spadowski's motion. Whether or not it passed at that time, that was the previous council, but that is the origin of when we chose the housing element. That's where that number came from. Very clear. It wasn't accidental. That's all it came from. The idea here is the more housing you put, the more we get in value, but we don't have to go up to the amount that was originally allowed under the old language of 400 and some units. So the other thing to be clear on here is that with the Stockman's deal, that doesn't change the underlying legal obligation on the number of units that we have to build on the site, but it does, through the land swap concept, give us another 10 million. So between the affordable housing element and the land swap, we actually are going to be able to get more money than the 14.5. But I think people have to understand is that the downtown site has a lot of stuff in it, and it's going to cost a lot of money. And that the plan we have, we cannot afford to just say, oh, this is a rich city and we can do whatever we want. And some of the alternative plans that are being floated would cost tens of millions of dollars more. So we have to be reasonable here.
The last question for the city attorney. The term legally required is being used liberally, I believe, to imply that we only need to build the 84 units and the rest of the money can just be forgiven or it can be ignored because we're not legally required to account for it. What would happen if we just built the 84 units and said, you know, the rest of the money, we're not going to account for it. We're just going to let it slide, so to speak. Does that put our whole affordable housing program at risk?
I'm not certain that would put your whole affordable housing program at risk, but it would create a situation where you may need to refund monies that were not appropriately used for affordable housing purposes back to the individuals you received them from.
So are we legally required to refund the money, or?
This was developed, your affordable housing fee was developed using the methodology provided in AB 1600 for development fee impacts.
Okay. So I think even a question of morals, it's wrong to collect money saying that you're going to use it for affordable housing and then you simply don't and you return it. So anyway.
Thank you.
One of the speakers, they asked, what would be a remedy for deliberately misrepresenting the facts on the referendum?
So Elections Code 18600 does provide that a signature gatherer cannot actively misrepresent the measure or what it intends to do. If there is a violation, that information is pursued by the law enforcement authorities, in this case, the district attorney's office. So an individual who believes they were misled as a percipient witness, I would direct them to submit their complaint to the district attorney with a request for investigation and prosecution. One thing to be aware of, it is a misdemeanor against the signature gatherer. However, it does not invalidate a signature.
Okay, very
So
good.
could I ask, I just want to follow up on that. From what you just said, there's really lack of a disincentive to mislead. And even if you do mislead, it doesn't invalidate the signature. So I interpret that as I can understand the behavior that we are witnessing then.
Okay, that's it for the Citizens Forum. Moving on to the consent calendar. Is there anything that anybody wishes to? We have two consent calendar items that wish to be spoken on. Hang on just a second. So 4.01, 4.07, 4.04. Okay, we got enough of these. What I'll do is I'll, let's see if we had 4.02. Bear with me just for a moment here. Okay, we have comments for 4.01. I'm going to pull 4.04 for some discussion, and also 4.07. So we're kind of all over the map. So what I'll do is let's have the comments first. 4.01, Mr. Wente. And 4.01, that's the approval of the minutes.
Council staff, thank you again for what you do. Mr. Stein, thank you for giving me the rules and regulations, as we are of the rule of laws. This is about the minutes, and the minutes, as I understand, are governed by the Brown Act. The Brown Act is a law. There's also a law in the U.S. Code 7881, Title 10, that specifically states that nobody can use or imitate the seal emblem or initials of the U.S. Marine Corps. So it's, again, another violation. And so where it's a rule of laws, the minutes were good, it was a law, that's a stretch, I get it.
Since you're there, why don't you go ahead and talk about 4.07?
4.07 downtown, the 4.2 million. So this is about the downtown plan, and I just want to reiterate that you all listened. You guys went through a thankless process with people coming at you in all directions, and the leadership that I see of this council and of this city and the city staff is really phenomenal. Like, I salute you and I thank you all. Sometimes it's tough, right, to stand and do this. So again, the incumbents that are in, I wish you were running, but you're not, Steve, but you got things to do. I hope it's not the end of it, but to continue what we've got going with the leadership, with the paying down of the obligations from the pension, with the financial fiduciary responsibility that you all are collectively showing. Outside looking in, people looking at us, they're saying Livermore is a well-run city. Right? Read the East Bay Times and the endorsement that comes through. We need the continual leadership, we need the discipline, we need the fiscal discipline, and you all are providing that. So thank you for what you do. My name's Carl Wente. I am speaking as an individual and not even a citizen of Livermore.
Thank you, Mr. Wente. And just for 4.07, for those that are keeping track, is appropriating $4.2 million for the Livermore Village infrastructure in the downtown, just to underscore Vice Mayor Warner's point that the downtown is an amazing plan and it's going to be expensive. So we're beginning that process, and that was $4.2 million. 4.04, this is the resolution declaring a shelter crisis in Livermore and authorizing the city to participate in the Homeless Emergency Aid Program. And just a couple quick questions. So there was $16 million allocated to Alameda County, and here comes Claudia Young up to on deck here. So there was the state budget, including $500 million funds. $16 million is allocated to Alameda County Continuum of Care, and there was $8 million, 8.67, allocated to the city of Oakland. So is that was the 8.6 part of that 16, or is it a total of 24 million?
No, it's a total of 24 million.
Okay, very good. I think it's interesting. There was by the way, tomorrow night there is a forum on homelessness and human services needs, which I would encourage everybody to that has an interest to come to that. If you'd like to just briefly give us the details on that.
Sure. Our Human Services Commission is seeking the public's input on local social service agencies and the needs of our community. Tomorrow night is specifically going to address housing and homelessness. So we're going to have a workshop to talk through what, as a community, we think are the top priorities. So this will happen at the regular Human Services Commission meeting.
And the time and place for that?
7 o'clock, and it's here at the council chambers.
So 7 o'clock here at the council chambers, the Human Services Commission. There's been a lot of discussion about possible remedies. I know that Albuquerque has a program where they take some of the homeless and have them cleaning up trash and weed abatement and the like. But an apartment in Albuquerque is $500 a month. So a part-time job is not going to do that here. It was very interesting in today's East Bay Times. There's a front page article that says, "A new secret in California, working while homeless." So this idea of, well, if you just give the homeless a part-time job, they won't be homeless anymore. We are some of the most expensive real estate on the planet. And in this, it talks about up like 13% of the people that are homeless are working. They just can't afford housing. So it really is very difficult, very complicated. And other people are talking about using old warehouses and just warehousing the homeless. And I don't think that's a solution for anybody, that we don't warehouse people. We're talking about creating a quality of life similar to what we were talking about with the Vineyard 2.0 plan. So as we discuss 4.04, I'm certainly all in favor of that as well. But it is we're entering some really. I don't think anybody could have foreseen this, that you'd have somebody working full time that couldn't afford housing. But this is the new reality. There's a lot of people that are struggling out there. I believe 30% of the people in the Tri-Valley are spending 50% of their income or more on housing. And these really are unprecedented times. So it's going to take a lot of creativity, a lot of hard work, and a lot of money. So I appreciate if anybody could come to the meeting tomorrow night, 7 o'clock right here, and bring your ideas, because we're certainly looking for those. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, I just would like to move, if we're done, move the consent calendar with one comment on 4.03.
Okay.
Just briefly. For those of you that are familiar with the collapsed sound wall on 580 in North Livermore, 4.03 will start the work to remedy that situation. So I know a lot of people in my neighborhood have been asking about it. Unfortunate situation, but I'm glad we're getting 4.03 hopefully passed tonight and get that sound wall taken down. So with that, I'd like to move the consent calendar.
There a second? Second by Councilmember Coomber. Any discussion on the consent calendar? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to 5.01, the very colorful district elections and district sites.
Brought to you by Crayola.
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Doug Alessio, your Administrative Service Director. I'm here to introduce again Michael Wagaman from Wagaman Associates, our demographer for this process, and Thomas Willis, our outside legal counsel. As you're aware, we're here to conduct the fourth public hearing to receive input so that the city can transition to district-based elections. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Wagaman.
Good evening. As mentioned, this is your fourth hearing with the goal of actually selecting a map, either from one of the existing maps before you or to make modifications to one of those maps. I will note if you do need to make modifications to a map and they are relatively minor, we can make those live during the course of that meeting. So it's not like the map isn't perfect yet. You can't have to kick it to another meeting. We can try to accommodate that in the course of this meeting. I'll note that I'm going to walk you through the 3 new maps that have been created for this meeting, but all of the maps that were previously presented are available to you, as are all the maps that were presented by members of the public, so those are all loaded. And finally, in addition to selecting a map, determining which of those 2 districts would be up in 2020 is one of the tasks asked of the council. How did we get here? You had 2 meetings before any maps were drawn to solicit public input on which redistricting criteria to prioritize and what communities of interest to protect. At the last meeting, again, we had the first round of maps where 5 maps were presented, which led to the council feedback and the additional maps that will be presented today. Also, as a reminder, after those first 2 council meetings, the council gave direction to me to focus on traditional redistricting criteria, particularly emphasizing the compactness of the districts and in specifically looking at using Livermore Avenue and First as potential dividing lines. Also to look at precinct boundaries, community of interest testimony, and not to consider incumbency. At the last meeting, 5 maps were presented: Sapphire, Lavender, Tangerine, Maroon, and Emerald. Again, as a result of that meeting, the council directed modifications and alternatives to Clan Emerald. Those are lime, olive, and sage, which I'll talk about later. As was jokingly commented earlier, I did use colors to describe the maps. That is to not create an impression that maps are ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, or one is got an A versus one got a D because it didn't study for its test. And again,
But aren't emeralds more important, more valuable than sapphires?
I will say, and again, I'm in monochrome, so I'm not producing any voodoo Jedi mind meld tricks on you as well. Staff has been performing public outreach throughout this process, as noted. I won't linger on that, though I will note that this advances. That there've been a brief summary of some of the public input that's come in so far. You've obviously had the longer in your previous council packet and along with your current council packet. that feedback has been kind of all over the place in the first round of maps, though the vast majority of people favored some map that generally divided the city into kind of quadrants, consistent with the initial council direction. And again, there's been relatively limited feedback on the additional maps that are before you today. And again, before I get into those final, actually presenting those maps, the goal here is again to select a final map and pick which districts should be first up in 2020. With that, we'll switch computers. And the map you see here, oops, got to turn the one off. There we go. The map here before you is, again, is the Emerald map. As you may recall, at the last council meeting, there were 4 potential changes to the Emerald map that were identified. One was along the Arroyo here to, instead of using the Arroyo, to move down and use Robertson Park Road as the dividing line between districts 1 and 4. That would also have the effect of moving a mobile home park that's right in here. That was identified as potentially being having more of a community of interest with District 1 than District 4. Second change was, again, to use the Arroyo here and move these areas around the high school into District 4 versus District 1. The third change relates to this triangle and to use Portola as the dividing line between Districts 1 and 2. And in the theme of triangles, between Districts 2 and 3 to move this little triangle here, and instead of using Junction as the dividing line, to use the railroad tracks and Livermore as the dividing lines between Districts 2 and 3. All 3 of these maps do at least some of these and take on some of these issues in different ways. The first one I will present is Plan Lime, which addresses the first 3 issues previously discussed. Again, using Robertson, let me remember that name of that road, Robertson Park Road as the dividing line, and then using the Arroyo here, using Portola as the dividing line there. So it does the first of the 3 issues. It does not deal with the 4th issue. Plan Olive does not address the first 3 issues, but looks at the 4th issue, but that's a little bit more of a complicated one in that if you move just this triangle here and do nothing else and then use First and the railroad as the dividing line as in the previous map, the total deviation of the plan becomes 14%. As the council may remember, 10% is one of those numbers that people look at to see if a plan is out of compliance. And council is here if you have more specific questions on that. So in order to accommodate that move, this additional population here was swapped between 2 and 3. So he basically traded this triangle for that triangle. This is the area kind of to the east of the Junction K-8 school. Again, using Portola as the dividing line there. So that is a trade-off there. So if you move the one triangle, then you move the other triangle. Plan, and again, I'll note that move was not specifically directed by council. That was to balance population and be consistent with other things. That's one of those places where if there's refinements, that be a place to look. The final map is Plan Sage. It is pretty easy, and that is the combination of Lime and Olive. It is using Robertson Road, using the Arroyo, using Portola, and then the swap discussed between Districts 2 and 3. All of these districts plans have, as configured, total deviations between 6 and 7%, so they all meet those criteria. And with that, that ends my presentation, so I am available to help you through the rest of this process or answer questions.
Okay, questions at this point? Questions? Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing. 2 cards, John Stein and Carl Wente.
John Stein, 1334 Cathy Court. I think any of the maps is acceptable. I think, as you can see, there's deep public interest. We seem to be in a time when things have gone awry. We've got Measure U, which is one labor union against the hospitals. We've got the referendum. Friends of Joan want to fix the downtown plan by destroying it. and we've got this, which is basically imposed upon us by the state. I think the amount of effort is more than is needed. Any of the plans, I mean, as long as they're balanced, contiguous, and compact, meet the city's needs. The city populations, communities of interest are pretty homogeneously distributed throughout the city. I think perhaps there should be less focus on the maps and more focus on the benefits and problems of the redistricting itself and how other communities have handled it, what changes in procedures should be done to reduce the problems, what benefits can be presented to the community to encourage them to at least accept this plan. And I think no more funds should be spent on maps. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Okay, Carl Whitty.
Mr. Mayor, council staff, thank you for what you do. Mr. Stein, thank you for your words. As always, we got up on the first one on this one. It was do it well, do it thoroughly, do it openly, and I really echo what Mr. Stein said. Yeah, I've done a good job. We're real close and splitting hairs. Bring it to a close. Well done to everybody that's worked on this process. I salute you for what you do. This is item 5.01, where, district-based elections pursuant to the elections code. I've just been reading the election code. I sit up at night and read it. Section 9601 B and C, each paid gatherer must have the prior signed statement. I talked to those folks. They didn't have the signed statement. I'm assuming that goes to district attorney. I know I'm going to get cut off soon. Let's get back to it, because people are lying. They're lying and they're breaking the laws. You guys did a good job here. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Wente. Okay, at that point, I'm going to close the public hearing, bring it back to the council. What is the council's pleasure? Anybody have a particular favorite that they like?
Yeah, I'll start. Again, thank you, Mr. Wagaman. I think you've followed our suggestions very, very well and understand the limits of the numbers and so on and so forth. I guess I'm still kind of stuck with your suggestion about compactness back when we first started this. And so I guess my preference would be lime. I think that's the first one you put up, right? And I guess I understand your point about that little triangle. Must be a lot of people that live there or something. Is that true?
It's a relatively dense area. If
Yeah.
you know the area, it's right near the where the ACE rail line stop is there.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Okay. So I kind of I didn't particularly like whatever the second color was. Olive, was it olive?
Correct.
That seemed to be more complicated and less compact. And I guess the third one, so I would put lime. My preference would be lime, then. So it's lime, olive, and what's your third color?
Sage.
Sage, sorry. My preference would be lime, then sage, then olive. But I think to Mr. Stein's point, let's get on with this. And I think he makes a good point about, and certainly one of the things I learned when I was at the League of California Cities meeting back some 6 months ago, when I went to a session on this, the people that have been through this, it was pretty clear that their experience was the negative impact of what it did to the city after the districts were drawn, that there seemed to be competition between the districts and so on, between the people that represented those districts in the city, in their respective cities. And so I think, to Mr. Stein's point, I think that's what we need to focus on. So I guess my suggestion, we should pick one of these tonight and make sure that the community understands this, and also that the folks that are going to serve on council are serving, yes, representing districts, but also representing the city of Livermore, what's best for the whole city.
Yeah, that's one of the concerns that I had, is we've gotten several comments that there should be one specific district to look after that specific district's interests. And what we've emphasized here is, yes, you may be elected from a district, but truly you're representing the entire city's best interests. Councilmember Spadowski.
Yeah, I'd agree with Councilmember Carling's comments. I am solidly lime at this point. If keep thinking now with these
Lime
new
with
words. I
envy,
keep
yeah.
thinking, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. It's like start using Simon and Garfunkel.
Or there's the
lyrics
lime in the
something.
coconut.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the reasoning behind that, in particular with olive, and it's just a little bit with the sage plan. It's just the way that the borders. With lime, it's easy to understand. It doesn't really separate neighborhoods. If you look at olive, between District 1 and 4, you have that zigzag line that goes through some of the non-arterial and collector streets or Robertson. So I want to keep the delineations on major roadways. Sage isn't bad, but then if you look with 2 and 3, you have that Lee Avenue where you're talking about that little triangle area. That's just, that puts somebody on one side of Lee Avenue in a different district from another, and that would occur nowhere else if you just, adopted Sage. So I think Lime avoids that, and I agree. Let's pick one, let's move on, and deal with it in the future.
Councilmember Coomber?
Oh, I'll just be quick because we're all kind of echoing each other tonight here. I will start from the other end. I really don't like olive. How about that? The population disparity is just too much. I want to take that one on. But I could pick either lime or sage. Quite honestly, I'm more or less sitting up here thinking of we keep referring to the triangle there. Would that be the Bermuda district? I don't know how what we do with the poor little triangle out there. It just concerns me. But yeah, I'm not okay with the whole process. I'm not okay with the way this is going. I know it's something we have to do. And it's just... I don't know. But were I to have to choose this evening, it would be the lime plan, likely.
Vice Mayor Warner.
I'm willing to bet it's unanimous for lime. We must all like gin and tonics versus martinis or something. But yeah, lime is the simplest. I think it's what I was talking about last time. Natural boundaries just makes sense.
Okay, it's a sweep. Again, I like the way you took all the input, a lot of the mathematical variations, and talking about the natural boundaries. I think this really is a remarkable example of taking all these really good ideas and consolidating that into what I think is really a very good plan and something that really justifiable and makes a lot of sense. So thank you very much. With that, I'd be willing to entertain a motion.
Sure, I'll move we accept Lime as the district map.
Okay.
And I would second that.
Okay. Motion by Councilmember Carling, seconded by Councilmember Coomber.
Mr. Mayor, 2 items. One, on that motion, would you specify which district should be up in 2020? And 2, generally what I ask of the council is in that motion to include direction to me to make any, to do any technical reviews or make any technical changes. So what I will do as the final step of whatever map you select is I'm going to go block by block to make sure that there's nothing wrong. I won't move any population, but just to make sure everything's copacetic and following council's direction, and we don't jump from one side of the street to the other for some reason. That wasn't intentional.
Can we do this in pieces?
That's what I thought.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So first, we'll have the motion to accept Lime as the configuration for the districts in Livermore. So with that, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? That passed unanimously. So second part, that is the...
Pick 2 districts.
Pardon me?
Pick 2 districts to go first.
District, so...
Yeah, so you need to explain that to us.
Okay, so obviously there's, so for example, you would be picking, for example, 1 and 4 in 2020 and 2 and 3 in 2022.
Correct.
Sure.
Okay, so, well, that would figure, I know we're not supposed to consider incumbency, but for example, in 2020 election, I'm not going to care.
But you don't care no matter what.
That's right. Well, actually, I do care because this is going to significantly impact my city. But for my own personal office, no. But there are incumbents whose terms will come up in 2020 and others who will come up in 2022, which would make it a lot easier because I'm still getting grief about the fact that we extended the term of office by 1 year. I'm still getting grief about that. So there's probably some easy way to do it where we've got incumbents that are naturally terming out at that time. And hopefully somebody looked at that ahead of time.
Yeah, I was looking at the map here,
Yeah.
and that's what, it's not necessarily incumbents that I'm worried about. It's keeping the rotation because we are, elected to 4-year terms. I wouldn't want, and I'm not running, but I would not like to see somebody fill this seat and then have to run again 2 years later.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So pick out the ones whose terms are
not.
the term of office. How about this? Where the term of office for that district coincides with the date that it comes up in rotation.
Yeah, so 4.
That's probably a better way to put it.
So 4, for example. 3 and 4.
Okay, is that 3 and 4 are
3
the?
and 4?
So wait, is that where we are? 3 and 4 is for. 3 and 4 is 2020. I'm taking your word for this, guys. Okay. All right.
I have that information. I just haven't turned it on because you haven't told me to. So I can, or I can follow your direction, or I can verify it.
Okay, let's verify that. So it will be 3 and 4 in 2020. As I said, I want to
3 and 4 have the members who would be the 2 members who are up in 2020. So that would be correct.
So 3 and 4 are up in 2020.
Correct.
Okay, so 1 and 2 then would be 2022.
Yes, and that's a numbering system that state law favors either doing odds and evens or sequentially. So 3 and 4 would be sequential, so you'd be fine there. You wouldn't have to renumber districts.
Okay, good.
Okay. So with that, the a motion that 3 and 4 will come up on 2020, and 1 and 2 rotates up into 2022. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion, yes.
Motion made by Councilmember Coomber. A second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Spadowski.
Can I ask a slightly different question, though? Can we discuss this for just a second?
Sure. I was just going to ask if there's any discussion on the motion.
Yeah, thank you. There's nobody that lives in 1, is that right?
I have to turn it back on. I believe Vice Mayor Warner lives.
Oh,
in
he
District
lives in 1. Okay. Oh, never mind.
There you are.
Huh?
Quarter of the population.
Thank you.
That's hard.
Good.
Well
On
done.
short notice,
Well
too.
done.
Good call.
No, I withdraw what I was going to say then. Never mind.
Okay. Oh, so I saw little dots there. Yeah, very good. So you, okay. So, any further discussion on the motion? Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. So 3 and 4 will be 2020. 1 and 2 will be 2022, which is a natural rotation as those terms come up. So that's another thing that makes logical sense. And there was a third piece that you needed.
The third piece is just, and it can be consistent, is to review the final boundaries to make sure they're consistent. And
Okay, and that's what you're going to do.
that's what I'm going to do.
Now, are you going to come back with that, or
So what you'll have at the next meeting is we'll present all the same information you've had before. So you'll get a new, you made no changes. So it'll be the line map as a proposed final map. You'll get those demographics. You'll get those PDFs as you've had before. In addition, staff will draft an ordinance, which will be the actual description of the new law. In that, there will also be what are called meets and bounds, which are the description in words of the boundaries. So it'll be proceed along the arroyo until you hit Robertson, then proceed easterly along Robertson, blah, 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 blah. So you'll get that additional documentation for this, describing these districts, again, verbally.
Great.
Okay, very good.
I'd just like to say thank you for
Yeah, me too.
what you did, and I think with your help that everything went very smoothly,
Yeah.
and really appreciate it.
Yeah, I second that.
Yeah,
Well done.
Thank you. Okay, 5.02. This is the Development Code Amendment for wireless
Mr. Mayor?
communication.
I'm not sure. It may be just be me. I'm not sure that I heard of. We had a motion by Coomber and a second by Stephen.
I'm sorry on that.
I'll say aye.
Thank you.
Yep. I
I'm
don't
sorry,
think we
it's-
voted, but we'll say aye.
It's me. It's not you. Please continue.
Oh, okay. Well, that was the first. Normally it's me. Okay, well, thank you. Okay, 5.02, the Development Code Amendment regarding wireless communication ordinance revision. Thank you. Oh. Yeah, Mr. Lee.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Marchand, members of the council. I'd like to introduce Michael Johnson to my right. He's with the Telecom Law Firm, and they've assisted us with drafting the new wireless telecommunications ordinance. We'll be presenting in two parts. First, Michael will be presenting a brief overview of the regulatory framework and some key concepts that are contained in the ordinance. And then I'll hit some highlights of the proposed ordinance. Michael?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for having me here tonight. As Mr. Lee mentioned, my name is Michael Johnson. I'm an associate attorney at the Telecom Law Firm, where this is kind of exactly what we do. We draft wireless ordinances for local governments in many instances and advise local governments on their regulatory authority over these types of facilities. And what we're dealing with here tonight, the item before you, is the introduction of a new wireless ordinance. It's dealing with the physical infrastructure that carriers deploy to provide their services. The antennas, the fiber, the power, the radios, this type of physical infrastructure that takes up space and occupies certain buildings or private property to provide their services. The city's authority to regulate these facilities is not unlimited. It's very, very much limited by a variety of different laws, whether they're federal or state. Now, the California Constitution vests cities with the authority to regulate things on the basis of public health and safety, but here comes Congress to say exactly what you can't do. And the Telecom Act is kind of the initial starting point for the limitations on your authority. And it basically boils down to you can't just say no for any reason whatsoever. You have to provide basic exceptions to your development code that allow the deployment of these facilities in a manner that's reasonable but still retains your local aesthetic discretion. You have to treat everyone, all providers, the same. And when you've approved a facility, the provider can then come in later on to modify that facility by right. That's with the Spectrum Act, 47 U.S.C. 1455, which this new ordinance now adopts some regulations specifically handled to deal with those types of modifications. The FCC also occupies this space to some degree. There's a lot of activity going on at the FCC right now for certain deployments in the public rights-of-way. But over the course of the years, the FCC has interpreted certain provisions of the Telecom Act to say how quickly you have to act on an application or a permit application on a siting proposal, or specific regulations that tell you exactly when you have to approve a modification to an existing facility. On the state side, the Public Utilities Code provides telephone corporations, among which are the wireless carriers, a statewide franchise to occupy the public right-of-way. So in the public right-of-way, there is a little further limited local authority to say absolutely no for whatever reason. So one of the large impetuses for this project was the deployment of small cells in the public right-of-way. That's the location where a large majority of these facilities are being deployed these days. But what do they look like and what do they do? This is a pretty typical small cell facility. It's a small cell facility that has been constructed without local input on what it looks like and where it goes. So if you leave carriers up to their own devices, this is what you would see. You would see these unconcealed facilities with kind of the Radio Shack deployment. They're just not going to include all the bells and whistles that you might want to see for your local community. So at the top, we have an antenna. It's the downlink uplink. It's what gives you this signal to your cell phone. cables connecting it to radios and other equipment inside that cage. Backup battery just below that, a power meter to tell the carrier how much they owe the utility provider for using the equipment at this location, and a disconnect switch to cut off the power in the event of emergency. They can power down that equipment, make sure it's safe to operate.
A quick question.
Absolutely.
What would be the typical frequency of something ugly like that in a neighborhood?
It varies. So each carrier is licensed their own frequencies.
Like every block, every mile?
How often they would be deployed?
Yeah. How many of these would there be in a typical neighborhood?
You're
Like
speaking
one
of-
per block, one per mile?
Right. I interpret that to mean the frequency bands with which they're operating.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
different frequency.
So funny you should mention that. Jonathan Kramer, the managing partner of the office, was recently at an industry trade show in Kansas City, and the anticipated deployment is now something like 60 for every square mile.
60 per square mile.
Square mile.
So
For each carrier?
That was the total. So it would be divide that by 4. Would be one for each carrier.
So everybody gets one.
Yes. Yeah. In
Whether
some
you like it
respects,
or not.
in some respects, yes. The move to the right of way has been in an effort to enhance the capacity by which these networks can operate. So the old traditional cell phone towers on private property, they provided some level of umbrella coverage. So you could text, you could make phone calls. This is really getting to a basic replacement for high-speed broadband, right? We're not looking at just traditional cable providers providing you your home internet. A lot of these wireless providers are going to be offering you home internet packages, potentially from sites like this.
So it's basically the rollout of 5G and whatever else comes after that.
So the first part of 5G, yes, it's a fixed wireless program. The mobile wireless part of 5G is yet to be implemented and deployed. They're still working on the final standards, but the fixed wireless, where you don't have to hand off phone calls when you're moving on the freeway, it's a lot more straightforward with the technology. So
How tall is that?
that utility pole is somewhere between 35 and
Oh my gosh.
40 feet. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Maybe a little lower than that. It's hard to really tell, actually, but not much more than 35 feet, if at all. But there is a better way, right? So here is what happens when local governments get involved in these planning decisions. You have a concealed antenna on a streetlight that was fabricated specifically for this use. The interior of the streetlight pole is hollowed out for conduits to run fiber and power to the equipment. The equipment shroud on the base of the pole is actually specifically designed in concert with the city of San Diego to make sure that the radio is on one side and the other, so you avoid this large block. There's actually another radio on the far side of that equipment shroud. It's a kind of a unique deployment that I haven't seen very many other places. But when local governments get involved, this is the sort of thing that you can expect. There is no electric meter on this facility because it operates under a flat rate service that SDG&E happened to allow. PG&E is less likely to deploy a flat rate metering or non-metering service, but they do have smart meters, wireless smart meters that kind of obviate the need for an ugly bubble electric meter that you see on the side of a house. Utility infrastructure existing in the right-of-way is a prime candidate for this type of deployment, but those poles tend to offer some pretty severe limitations with how the facility can be deployed. You can't bore through a piece of wood to deploy the fiber and the power. It's got to keep its structural integrity. So what the ordinance tries to do is to streamline the design as much as possible and encourage the antenna deployment on the right-hand side rather than the antenna deployment on the left-hand side. You can see there's 2 antennas on the left-hand picture that are projecting from the middle of the pole. To avoid those types of obstructions and protrusions, we like to streamline the design, encourage the deployment of antennas on top of the pole.
So just a quick question. So typically these are one carrier per pole. This isn't, I mean, how does the whole co-location thing play into this? I know we recently lost control over co-location, as I understand it. How does that play into?
Carriers don't like to share on these poles. This deployment on the left is somewhat unique in that you're seeing the 2 antennas. It's more common to just see one. But with co-location, the big issue on utility poles is the structural capacity of the pole.
Right.
And even the electric capacity of the pole. Sometimes they are bringing...
limited.
Yes, exactly. So the question being, will co-location occur? Yes, in limited circumstances. it's more likely to occur on your major macro facilities rather than on the public right of way. They want to have more separation between their antennas.
Gotcha.
Another example of an unconcealed facility without the type of public input that localities would like to have. This is the same equipment, properly concealed. Same exact equipment in shrouds. So the one on the left is deployed in San Diego, this little cube shroud that hides all that ugly mess of wires and radio equipment. It seems to work well for San Diego. The design on the right is, personally, I prefer it, but it was deployed in the city of Lakewood down in Southern California, and it's kind of a sheath that wraps over the street light and has the ancillary radio equipment on that backpack-style shroud.
The existing street light?
The existing street light, yes. So when they put these caps on them, it's typically the existing street light. There is a large trend to replace the pole itself and replace them with one of the poles that are retrofitted to have the equipment interior.
So when it's an existing street light, they use the existing conduit to run new power, or are they tapping off the power? Probably not tapping off the power of the street light.
The cities do not like to share their power.
Right, that's what I'm...
Yeah, so a new separate drop, separately metered, would come in.
Gotcha. Yeah. All underground.
It depends.
Okay.
It depends where you are. In a situation like this, it's very unlikely that undergrounding would be enforceable because all the other utilities are already above ground. Exactly. Yeah. But in this scenario where you have underground utilities, you could certainly expect that power run fiber to be underground.
Right.
So with this picture here, are you suggesting that if we do it right, we can make sure we have the one on the right and not the left?
Yes, the city can actually make those specific preferences, and one of the elements before you tonight is a set of design guidelines that would help make clear and be able to adapt more flexibly to changes in design, however the Planning Commission or the council sees fit to regulate these facilities in their community. And now to the big boys, the macro facilities. These are the ones you're more familiar with, and they are probably less of a hot button issue these days because most of the deployment is being shuttled to the right of way. But this is an example of what the ordinance calls pseudo-naturally integrated facilities. Faux trees, right? Faux pine trees on the left, a faux palm tree in the middle, the one that's standing up more straight than all the other palm trees. And then the one on the left is one that works particularly well in Southern California. We have a lot of eucalyptus trees. These mono-eucalyptus designs actually conceal the antennas quite well with their broad leaves, wider branches, more potential for modification in the future too without making huge wholesale design changes to the trees. Buildings and existing structures offer some pretty good places to conceal equipment. I would not categorize these as the best, but just gives you an idea of what is out there. On the top left-hand corner are pop-out boxes. There's just antennas behind those. On the right-hand side, a faux Spanish tile roof that's maybe a little too vertical for this particular building, but that's concealing about 8 to 12 antennas behind that. And then the church steeple on the left-hand side has some boxes around that bell tower that are concealing antenna equipment as well. And the ancillary equipment cabinets, computer processing equipment would likely be in the interior of the building rather than on the rooftop there. But this is what the ordinance tries to accomplish more than the prior slide with architecturally integrated facilities. These are using basically existing architectural features to totally conceal the equipment such that nobody would really know it exists, that it's there. The one in the top left may not be as appropriate for Livermore as maybe the photographs on the right and the bottom left. The bottom left, the antennas are concealed within that church steeple. The top right, just above the Starbucks sign and below the Spanish tile roof. And then the left-hand side, it's basically a big tower in that silo. But this slide helps to give you a frame of reference on the types of designs that are out there. It's not limited to just monopoles, exposed antennas. There are some pretty cool and unique designs that the city can enforce with these regulations.
Several years ago, there was a potential cell facility over by Campo Debacci, and it was like a campanile. I mean, it literally looked like the UC Berkeley campanile, and it was just off from the, and it really fit the architecture quite well. Unfortunately, that didn't happen because that went over to the quarry, I believe. But with some really interesting possibilities. You said like this. Oh, yeah.
These are just a couple more, and this will be the last of it. Flagpoles offer, a nice option. They're limited in their ability to modify them in the future because they are so slimline It's hard to add antennas when it's that thin already. The facility on the bottom left, we see these at golf courses quite a bit. There's just a water tower out on, between the 12th and the 13th tee box with a water tower that's got antennas behind it to provide the services that these companies are looking to provide, and that we're all looking to use, to be honest. And with that, I can take questions now, or we can also hold those to the end of Mr. Lee's presentation.
Questions at this point? Okay, very good. I do have a speaker card. Dante Williams?
Yes, so
I'm sorry.
we have a
moving
second
ahead.
part to the presentation. It should just take a few minutes.
Okay.
So our current ordinance was adopted in 2011, and there have been some substantial changes in federal regulations as well as in the industry. So we're proposing this new ordinance that has 4 major objectives. The first is to streamline the review process to comply with the federal and state requirements, including shot clocks limiting the amount of time the city has to act on a telecom application. Second objective is to retain as much control over the location and the statics of wireless facilities as feasible. Third is regulate small cell facilities located in the right-of-way. And finally, to establish an ordinance that is adaptable to future change in the telecom industry as well as in federal and state regulations. So just a few key points about the proposed ordinance. It creates a new review process for eligible facilities. These are mainly co-locations on existing facilities or swapping out antennas. Secondly, we're including location criteria for telecom facilities from the most preferred locations, which are city-owned properties, to the most discouraged, which are our residential zones. Third, we are including new regulations for small cell facilities located in the public right-of-way. And to address an earlier question, the ordinance does require a 200-foot separation between facilities, regardless of the carrier, so we don't have like a forest of antennas in a concentrated location. And then finally, staff will have the option to refer any of these applications to the Planning Commission if there's a significant policy or design issue related to that application. Another major change is we're pulling the conditions of approval and design guidelines from the ordinance, and these will be standalone documents adopted by council through a resolution. And what this allows is a more nimble process should future changes need to be made. And then another new key concept are master license agreements. The city may enter into these agreements with a wireless provider to install new wireless facilities on city-owned poles located in the right-of-way. And the benefits of these agreements are that it establishes a robust wireless broadband network, it streamlines the review process, reduces administrative costs, and preserves the city's authority to manage the public right-of-way. So this is basically a contract between the city as a property owner and the telecom carriers who would be leasing city poles. So given these considerations, staff is recommending the City Council adopt a resolution establishing standard conditions of approval, adopt a resolution establishing design guidelines for these wireless facilities, and finally to introduce an ordinance approving Development Code Amendment 18005. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay, any questions for staff at this point? Okay, now I'm going to open the public hearing. I have one speaker card from Dante Williams.
Introduce myself. I'm Dante Williams. I'm here representing Verizon Wireless. I am with the small cell team. I'm here locally. And my request, first of all, I wanted to thank the mayor and the council members, staff for allowing us to speak in this public forum. We've sent several letters, and we're requesting that the city not adopt the ordinance in its current form. We have a couple, we have more detail in the letters we've sent, but in this public forum, I just want to hit a couple key points while we're asking the city to hold off at this point. One is that a use permit should not be required for right-of-way facilities because the telephone corporation's use of the right-of-way is already authorized by state law. As you mentioned, the Public Utilities Code 7901. Also, the location preference and the discouragement of facilities downtown or within certain distances of residents also contradicts Section 7901. That grants telephone corporations the right to use any portion of the right-of-way. There's also concerns that we have in mild adjustments to the actual antenna types and size. So I wanted to just speak to quickly the limit of a 4 foot over existing pole height, plus any general order 95 separation distance should be slightly expanded to 6 feet. This would accommodate optimal 4 foot antennas plus required mounts underneath in antennas that can give you that concealment that you're looking for. The current size doesn't account for the mount and a shroud. So that's also, we wanted to reevaluate that. Also, the antenna volume limit of 3 cubic feet would bar use of 4 foot cylindrical antennas, which were the design that they showed that was not on the wood pole but was on the light standard. And it would also require fewer facilities if we had a more antenna, more cubic foot for space. So as we get better coverage from the larger antenna, you have less facilities required. And there's also a challenge that we have with the 200 foot is when you get into, different vendors require their own frequency be propagated. So we don't have control over where our competitors are deploying. We don't have control over, we don't want to get into a situation where, you get one competitor trying to take up all the space because they know that there's a 200-foot buffer and shutting out other vendors. So those are just some key points that I wanted to bring to your attention that we ask that you work with us. We want to partner with you guys. We do agree that the MLA process is a great process to sit down with the carrier and partner with the city. It's going to take a partnership. We're not trying to push anything through. We need to partner together on the MLA process that gets us to a design that's agreeable with the aesthetic and what the city needs, and also gives a robust 4 and 5G network to customers that are common to both of us, which are your constituents. So at this point, take any questions from anyone who has questions.
Any questions, Mr. Williams? Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for comments. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the council. Questions, comments from the council?
Just had a quick comment. I wanted to thank the Planning Commission for such a robust discussion on it. It really helped me with the issue. They answered a lot of questions. I think they discussed many of the concerns that were brought up here tonight. That's what they're there for. They're there to do some of the heavy lifting for us. And I could just state that I agree with the staff's recommendation.
So what Mr. Williams brought up some points that I don't know. Have you heard of the same concerns from other carriers or not?
Yes, there was a pretty extensive comment period opened up to the public, and a large number of commenters were specifically from the industry. And Verizon, as well as other industry commenters, have the same position about this state law, Section 7901, that differs pretty extensively from how local governments interpret that language. So what it says is that you have to allow carriers inside the public right-of-way to the extent that it would not incommode the public's use of the right-of-way. The term incommode means something very specific. It's an archaic term, but it preserves your aesthetic discretion. So it does allow you to impose location requirements. It does allow you to impose basic aesthetic requirements, what they look like, but you can't just say no to facilities entering the right-of-way. That's essentially what that statute boils down to.
Also, with regard to that, the city of Livermore has litigated that particular issue. In addition to T-Mobile Wireless versus San Francisco, we had our own case, Livermore versus AT&T, where the court did confirm our ability to regulate for aesthetic purposes in the right-of-way, subject to the time, place, and manner restrictions.
So I guess the point is we've taken into those considerations. We still think this is the right thing to do. Okay.
And also, I wanted to add one of the reasons why I could recommend it is I think that I'm not a fan of giving up even more control. I feel that some of the requirements that are coming down from federal and state agencies, we're just losing control on these items. So voluntarily giving up aesthetics or the right to comment on placement, I can't agree with.
Well, see, things that are being done to us rather than with us. Districting that we just talked about is one of those, and losing local control is another one. That's something that's very important to all of us, and League of California Cities is maintaining local control. Any other questions, comments?
So, yeah, I have a question. I mean, I'm all for local control, but how do we get to a working relationship where some of these technical issues, and where if we go to the point of, well, we're going to go to local control over this, we may not actually end up with the best design, is what I've heard overall. So what's the process going forward for actually working out some of the details as we go through here?
So there are two key ways. The first that Mr. Williams mentioned was the master license agreement. So the current ordinance, the proposed ordinance before you, exempts those facilities from the planning process. It allows the parties as in an arm's length transaction to negotiate what the design would be outside the scope of the regulatory process. So an application for a city-owned pole, like your streetlights or traffic signals, would go through a contract rather than through this regulatory process. If we're going on third-party owned poles, third-party owned streetlights, or third-party owned utilities, it's very difficult to reach a consensus on what the carriers want and what local governments want to see in their communities. Through extensive discussions with staff, the idea of this equipment being deployed too large on utility poles all over the city was a concern, and these regulations do their best to make sure that we can make those facilities look as attractive as possible.
So, if I understood, with these regulations, we get to have the control, and we still have the latitude to work in specific situations to make sure everything makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, any additional questions, comments?
I'll move we accept staff recommendations.
Moved by Councilmember Carling.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Spadowski. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Okay, 5.03 is going to be continued to another time, to a future meeting. Moving on to matters for consideration, discussion, and direction regarding the 2018 National Citizen Survey.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Christine Martin, Deputy City Manager. It is national survey time again. Every 2 years since 2004, the Council has partnered with the National Research Center to conduct the National Citizen Survey. The survey is just one of the tools that the City Council uses to identify resident values and perceptions of city services and quality of life. The survey's statistically valid results will be incorporated into City Council goals and priorities in your goal-setting efforts in February of next year. The survey questions pertain to 8 broad categories, including safety, mobility, the built and natural environments, education and enrichment, community engagement, recreation and wellness, and the economy. The city may include up to 3 local closed-end policy questions in the survey, in addition to the standardized questions that are used by cities throughout the country. Your staff report this evening included an attachment with all of the year's prior questions. The council has chosen to include custom questions in every survey except for the one we did in 2012. And past topics have included such items as strategic planning priorities, downtown revitalization, BART to Livermore, and homelessness. As in past survey years, the survey will begin in early November and conclude in late December. Staff is seeking direction this evening regarding whether or not to include up to 1 to 3 policy questions, and if so, what would those question topics be? If topics are identified, staff will work with the National Research Center on the final design of those questions. And this concludes my report this evening, and staff is available for any questions.
Questions for staff at this point? Okay. I don't have any cards. Anybody have any ideas for some questions that they might want to add to the survey?
I was, well, looking at 2016, I don't think we need one on BART.
Especially after May 25th of this year.
Yeah, right. So, I do think I think it would be interesting to, housing is still a big bone of contention. So I think that would be, one around housing, I think would be good. And probably on homelessness. I think that's becoming increasingly obvious to people. And we've been getting, I've been on a couple of years now, but there seem to be more emails about homelessness and concerns about that. And certainly we have folks like Mr. Scott that come on a regular basis to talk about it. So I think something on homelessness and the housing would be good. And then I'm not sure, maybe some other folks have traffic or parking, I suppose.
You read my mind.
Well, we got a lot of the questions about that from our outreach. A couple of the suggestions that I was thinking of was because it's all about money, and we've been talking about some of the infrastructure down in throughout the city of Livermore. A bond around asking for, because they're closed-end questions, so it's a yes or no. But support for a bond for infrastructure replacement might be a possibility. Yes or no. Would you? We're looking for money for the Springtown open space, and as we're going into district elections and looking for regional consensus, it'd be interesting to see if there is any support for creating a citywide open space park that would be located in Springtown, associated with the former golf course. And I know that we had talked about this before, and there was mixed support or opposition, but asking the question, because we understand this is going to be a larger issue as we get farther down the road, would there be support for a parcel tax or some sort of tax or bond to support the arts in Livermore? Art programming, art facilities. So that would be my, a parcel tax for supporting the arts, a bond for infrastructure, whether North or South Livermore, or a bond for Springtown open space. And those would be all yes or no questions.
We can ask all three of those as part of one larger question. Is that what you're saying?
Oh,
how many questions do we get?
Three questions.
So just those three and not these others?
Well, these are just the ones that I came up with.
Well, I guess my thought is the general thing that I heard you raise is there an interest in possibly bonds, and those would be examples of it. But is there any appetite for that? Whether it's rather than being specific on each, is there an appetite to consider such a thing, given that there's a variety of needs to which you can go to? So could we craft that, your three questions into one?
Well, can I comment on that question? I would almost think when you're asking for new funding measures for specific projects, you need to give some kind of background. If we just say, is there support for issuing a new bond or some new tax, I can tell you right now it's probably no, without giving a good solid background as to what the Springtown plan is. I would almost suggest that we do a separate survey on those issues at some point about new revenue measures and not necessarily include this in the, because of that fact. I don't think we have enough space here to give the proper background to frame that question.
Could I add? This came up in the intergovernmental meeting, and the idea there is if we're going to do something like that, we may need to get all three governmental agencies behind it. So I kind of agree that it's a separate opportunity for a survey with the right background information being given. One easy way to replace question one here is just to direct some equivalent thing with respect to the Valley Link.
Oh.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody knows about that.
Or
Okay.
Can I make a suggestion about question one? When thinking about that as keeping, so we have the homelessness, we have the housing. Maybe question one revolving around alternative forms of transportation. Maybe the question, should the city subsidize or, or look at programs to encourage alternate forms of transportation, such as rideshare services like Uber and Lyft. We have the demonstration project in Dublin, where Wheels is funding a discount, and that's been very successful. Discount for Uber, Lyft, and taxi companies. So somebody's on their phone. There's a geofence drawn in the area. If they are in Dublin and going to the BART station, a little pop-up says, if you're sharing this ride, you're qualified for a $5 subsidy, making it cheaper. So should we look into something like that? If you're in Livermore, if you're a resident in Livermore and you're going to downtown, or if you're going to the outlet mall, here's a $2 or $3 discount on your ride if you use Uber and Lyft. So it's starting to, we got into this a little bit with the downtown, and maybe we can even expand, should we look at a drop-off location downtown? We do have one planned, but should we look at additional drop-off locations? And here's where it starts getting a little, people look at me like I got snakes coming out of my eyes, but, start talking about how are we going to deal with autonomous vehicles? They're coming, they're here. They will be prevalent within the next 5 years. So how do we deal with autonomous vehicles dropping people off in downtown or at the outlet mall or any other location? We're going to need landing strips, so to speak, for these vehicles to come in and drop off, because you're not going to have them stopping on First Street in front of the ale house as somebody gets out and backing up traffic. So I don't know if we can wrap that all up into one new transportation technologies, and what's the interest behind the city, dipping our hand into that.
And let me just add, while you're pondering, that they don't have to be yes or no, but they do have to have a scale, like, agree, strongly agree, support, those kinds of things. So it doesn't have to quite be yes or no.
So I think it could, I really like the suggestion that Councilmember Spadowski made, and I think you could easily say, to what extent do you support the city looking into alternative transportation modes?
Such as subsidizing ride-share services and encouraging, I don't know, the use of, see, it's a little too early to say the use of autonomous vehicles, because they're not here yet. They're coming, I'm telling you.
Well, drones.
We save that for the 2020 questions.
Yeah, that could be 2020, but no, Chevy has a model coming out next year that has no steering wheel. Exactly. So.
Have you got enough?
Reviewing, essentially what I heard was question 2 and question 3, with some minor tinkering, or just as they were from 2016, would essentially make it onto the 2018 survey, and replacing question number 1 would be some version of a question to what extent do you support city efforts to encourage, and then the question is, what umbrella do you want to put rideshare services within Livermore to reduce parking and traffic impacts, such areas as downtown, the outlets. Words around that, making it slightly more generic, but that's kind of the idea of would there be strong support for the city to get more actively involved in those areas rather than be passive?
I'd like to, on the third one, regarding the housing, it seems to focus on homelessness, but I was wondering if we could expand that a little bit for low to moderate income. I mean, the workforce type housing. I mean, that's been the big, as much a bone of contention as for the homeless. Is there a way we can expand that to not just who are experiencing homelessness, but people that are, school teachers and restaurant workers and so on that have trouble finding a place to live in Livermore?
So perhaps essentially taking a version of what was question 3 to try and deal with essentially extremely affordable housing. So maybe reworking that to that.
Yeah.
And then essentially what would be your support for workforce housing, such as that for
Yeah.
teachers and others to be able to live within the community.
Right.
I would strongly support, kind of support, not at all support
Right.
sort of answer on
So then drop the homelessness.
we would assume that homelessness continues to be on people's minds.
Sure.
And then essentially rework what was question 3 to be a little more specific around the kinds of services, the level of support around the kinds of services to deal with those issues.
Wait a minute.
So essentially, it's the supportive housing or extremely affordable housing being one question, and more the moderate or workforce housing being another question. Was that what you were asking?
Well, that's what I was getting at. I mean, the housing that we're supporting, down here for veterans, preference for veterans, as well as the workforce or housing that we're talking about on the Catalyst site. There may be opportunities for homeless people currently homeless to move in there, but it's really intended for people with low to moderate incomes, right? And so and that's been the biggest, to me, it's been, at least that's what I mean, we heard it again here tonight about whether it's 84 or 130. I mean, I'd like to get a gauge for the community of what they think about that kind of housing for that segment of the population.
So if I could just build on what you're saying, right now we have 2 and 3, which are both targeted to homelessness.
Right.
What you're saying is we only need 1.
Yeah.
Right.
Just to make sure, and it's hard to believe that that's not on most people's mind as an issue, right? So there shouldn't be any surprise on that one. But I do think getting up a little bit further in the range and finding out the support, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So, essentially a question around transportation, alternative rideshare, things like that is question 1. A question essentially on community support for city efforts to alleviate homelessness, including perhaps some things to deal services and or housing to deal with that. And then finally, support for production of low and moderate income housing to support teachers, first responders, and other professionals within the community.
Right.
And again, the sort of the sliding scale, strongly support down to strongly oppose.
Okay.
Don't know's not the opposite.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
You have enough?
All right.
Good. Thanks.
All right, and we'll turn this over to the professionals to try and get good answers.
Congratulations on the promotion, by the way.
Yes, congratulations.
So now she'll fix this for us.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we're done with 6.01. On to 6.02, update on the fiscal years 2017 to 19 City Council goals and priorities.
Where's the... click over there. Well, good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council. I'm your City Manager, Mark Roberts, and our actual next 3 presentations should be a little easier for you since you don't have to do anything with them. They are giving you updates on work programs that you've sent us off to do and accomplish, and we wanted to spend some time giving you feedback on what those items were and then what progress we've made over the last couple of years on working on those items. Normally, we don't put 3 updates at once, but you've had relatively busy council meetings over the last couple of months, so we've had to shuffle things around, and they all ended up on this particular agenda item. So first off, I'm going to be going over your priorities overall, and then we're going to have Herbert Cole give us an update on disaster preparedness, and then finally, Claudia Young is going to talk to us about what we've been doing on homeless strategies. So with that, we're going to start off. Every 2 years, the City Council begins a process to adopt new priorities. The priorities really are areas where the council wants to focus community attention or spend specific resources. Of course, the vast bulk of your general fund is spent on things that aren't on these priorities in particular. Public safety, of course, always takes half off the top, and a whole variety of other things are done by the bulk of your city staff. But these items included a tremendous amount of work across a wide number of departments in the past couple of years. You can see those items listed up there from long-term financial stability down to innovation and economic development. So we're going to start off the evening, if I can run this, with long-term financial stability. It is and has been a council goal to provide this so that we can ultimately use this as a bedrock upon which to build all the rest of the programs, changes, and services that the city delivers. During this period of time, you identified essentially several primary action areas revolving around adopting of policies, fee studies, updating software, aligning our core services, and then ultimately providing funding resources for infrastructure. So during the last 18 or 19 months, we've accomplished a few very important things. Council adopted the fee study in September of 2017, and a debt policy and a compensation policy were both adopted in April of 2018. We transitioned the city's financial software system to a new technology in January of this year, and then we continue to work on our infrastructure funding policy, and we'll be returning to you by the end of the year with our first cut at that. During the last several budgets, you've already put away $2 million a year into that. So we've got the putting the money into the savings account working well. Now your policy will give guidance on how do we pull money out of that appropriately and use that for the right purposes. Affordable housing and homelessness, you're going to get a lot more information on homelessness, so I'm going to actually spend a little bit more time on our accomplishments on affordable housing during just the very brief time since you've set these goals. You basically see the first 3 bullet items up there deal with very specific parts of how do we create more affordable housing. The last bullet item there is homeless services, and Claudia Young's going to give us more of an update as we move forward with that a little bit later in the evening. I'm going to talk about just a few of the projects that have made significant progress over the past 2 years, and I want to start off with Chestnut Square. That is a total of 114 affordable units, 72 set aside for senior and 42 set aside for family, in addition to 44 market rate townhomes. That project is under construction. In fact, if you've been out to the corner of Chestnut and P, you'll see it's well underway and making tremendous progress. So we're very proud of that. And we are well along the way on the senior part of that project. The family part of the project, you'll remember at your last council meeting, you took additional steps to facilitate moving that part of the project forward, and we would expect breaking ground next summer on that part of the project. Sunflower Hill is in the final design stages and in the process of obtaining funding. As you know, with any affordable housing project, it normally has to go through sometimes 2 or 3 funding sources, but many times 5, 6, 7, or even 8 funding sources, from federal tax credits to state programs to regional programs to local programs. Cobbling together those funding sources, which are all highly structured, and putting them together in a package that makes a feasible project is one of the things that our funding partners are really good at. And we are lucky enough to work with some of the best in the business here. Sunflower Hill will preserve a historic single-family home and also provide 44 affordable units for adults with developmental disabilities. It's a truly wonderful project, a very complicated project, and we look forward to that moving forward here in the next year and trying to ultimately gain its tax credit funding. Central to some of the major achievements we've done in the last 2 years has been the Stockman's land swap deal. So what you have with that deal is when the Stockman's Association sold the current Civic Center site to the city over 50 years ago, the agreement had 2 parts to it. It required construction of a park on this site, where we are now, and it precluded housing from being on this site. In negotiations with the city, and some of you sitting up there were very key to those negotiations, the city and the Stockman's Associations entered into an innovative agreement where we're going to move the park downtown and a portion of the housing that was going to be on the site downtown here, essentially right next door on Pacific Avenue, right across the street from the senior housing that's been there for several decades. And it'll provide essentially 130 units with a preference for seniors and veterans, a tremendous testament to the things that the Stockmen found very important, and a wonderful opportunity to put open space in the downtown. Now, saying it's really easy and getting it done requires dozens of different agreements and statements and requirements, and all of those have been accomplished in a way that has moved the project along very nicely. In addition to the 130 units, of course, here on Pacific Avenue, the other part of your downtown project includes 130 units of workforce housing on your downtown site. So tremendous accomplishment on those 2 intertwined projects here. Now, we've been talking about projects where the city takes a direct and partnership role, where we either own property, we have provided funds, or we otherwise partner directly with nonprofits to create wholly affordable projects. The city also has an inclusionary program. In fact, we have one of the very first inclusionary programs in the state of California and one of the longest running ones. And that requires a portion of every market rate project to include affordable units. And so the 4 examples up there on the screen are examples of 4 projects that have gone through the process or through construction in the last 2 years. And they include Centra up on North Front Avenue, the Vines at East Avenue in South Vasco, Wayland on the former Sonoma School site, and Auburn Grove, the former Cotteroli dealership in First Street near Portola. The one thing you'll note about this project and the others we talked about, they're distributed throughout the community. They're in every quadrant or every district, if you were, of the city, and that's always been a driving force for for councils over time, was to make sure that there were housing opportunities throughout the community for a variety of incomes. Together, we have a very robust rental program, a program where we have nonprofit partners, and then essentially these units that we provide through in partnership with for-profit developers. To give you a sense of scale, if that sounded like a lot, it is. In fact, there are almost 500 affordable units in some stage of development moving forward here. It's in the 490s, if essentially you count all of those particular projects up. And essentially what that means, that's more units of affordable housing than the city has ever had in the development planning, design, and construction pipeline. To give you a sense of scale, right now out in the entire community over the last 30 years, and the ones that are actually remaining affordable today, because some in the early days had affordability requirements that expired relatively quickly after they were built. But we have almost 1,000 units within the city of both rental and for sale housing that have affordability components on it. So the amount of work that's going on during this 2-year period is quite dramatic in scale versus what we have done before. And of course, we're very proud of that work. As your staff, and if you're wondering why your Housing and Human Services staff seems a little behind, it's because they're busier than they have ever been. And we, of course, have a very lean staff there. Now, you're going to hear more about our homeless services, so just want to touch on just a couple of things. In fact, we started out by establishing our Housing First strategy, which essentially puts housing at the center of a comprehensive strategy to provide both housing, permanent housing, ultimately, and services wrapped around that. We are providing office space for our partners in dealing with and addressing homelessness so that they can respond more effectively and efficiently to partner with us. We've established a homeless task force, bringing together various city departments and our contractors, again, to be able to respond in a timely manner and respond appropriately. And as you'll hear in the presentation a little later this evening, homelessness has many different facets. The homeless are almost as varied as you could imagine as to what brought them to homelessness and what their situation is in that. So a one-size-fits-all does not at all work on homelessness. Finally, we created the Homeless One online portal, along with making sure that we had appropriate policing resources out in the community to deal with crime within the homeless community. Some of the folks who are most subject to crime are actually the homeless themselves. And so making sure that we weed out bad actors in that community in particular to the most vulnerable people is a key part of our strategy. And we now have 2 full-time officers who are assigned to dealing with that challenge. On asset management, you'll remember that the city owns an enormous amount of stuff. About $2.5 billion worth of physical assets. And so this year, these last 2 years, the goals have been to address that issue by taking it in chunks. And the first chunk is to figure out what are the range of these assets and generally what condition are they in. You can't really start to have a game plan until you know what you've got on the ground. The second part of that strategy is to develop our ultimate approaches, or the range of approaches that we're going to use for all of these different assets. It, of course, would be easiest if the city had just enormous amounts of cash that it wasn't currently utilizing, and we could simply spend tens of millions of dollars more a year in infrastructure maintenance.
That's all the extra money?
And as your administrative services director will tell you, until there's more than 100 cents in a dollar, there is no extra money here. So our challenge really is with the existing resources we have is how do we best manage those assets over the long run? Well, first, the good news. The good news is very few of our assets are actually in crisis. Given the total range of how infrastructure is in local communities across the nation, we're doing pretty well, and we're pretty far ahead of the curve. The bad news is if you can sort of just do the math on $2.5 billion worth of infrastructure and imagining even hypothetical, lifespans, the zeros don't move over far enough. You end up needing dozens and dozens of millions of dollars additionally. So we're looking at a variety of strategies. From how we actually do work technically to make sure that we're totally efficient on that, to how do we utilize the asset? Do we run to fail? Do we replace it in kind when it actually fails, or is it something less expensive over the long term? If it's already supposed to be someone's asset to maintain, do we actually make that more direct so that those parties are directly responsible for that? Or in some cases, do we have a different level of standard, different level of service for each of those assets? So the great news is we've actually walked through each of those different kinds of assets: decorative walls, sidewalks, pedestrian ramps, artwork, bridges, curbs, gutters, parks, landscape, trails, streets, traffic control, storm drains, and waterways. And each of those areas was taken and evaluated by the council, and you gave us direction to return on more specific policy options. We also issued an RFP for tree inventory project to locate and access the health of every tree the city owns, since that's a major part of what provides quality of life in the community. If you could imagine our city without a single tree in it, it wouldn't be very nice many months of the year. So that's a particularly long-lived and important piece of the assets. In addition, we established the Citizens Asset Management Committee, held public outreach meetings at the farmers market, and created the community feedback page on the website. Disaster preparedness and public safety is the next of the council's goals. And you can see the progress, you can see the primary action areas that are listed up there, focusing on several key areas. One is pre-planning. One is appropriate training of your staff and community, and finally having physical facilities in order to ultimately carry out disaster response, which is the three-pronged disaster preparedness piece. In addition, exploring the use of technology for public safety and continuing to focus on traffic behavior and enforcement. These last couple of years, we've hired Herbert Cole, our management analyst for disaster preparedness, and the city has approved both our emergency operations plan and our hazard mitigation plan, both in January of this year. Making sure that we have the appropriate plans in place is one of the first key functions. Indeed, we continue to work on a whole number of plans and annexes. You'll hear a little bit more about that from Herbert this evening. Training staff is another key feature. We sent 35 of your senior staff to an extensive 4-day intensive training at the California Specialized Training Institute. Over 200 employees have gone to internal workshops dealing with issues as broad as disaster service worker requirements to essentially hazard mitigation for home and work, making sure that our employees are well prepared and well able to respond after a disaster. Finally, over 325 employees have completed a National Incident Management System or a Standard Emergency Management System in training, and that's so we can speak a common language. Ultimately, as a disaster goes on, we will ultimately fall into the rhythm of all of those funny words and funny tasks. But boy, during the first few hours, it's really helpful if we can communicate effectively with each other and be not learning some of those words and phrases for the very first time. Disaster preparedness, public education, and public safety is another key piece of what we've been doing in conducting basically a series of community emergency preparedness presentations for home, for businesses, and we've prepared a series of short emergency preparedness videos. So essentially working with our community to make sure that they have the information they need and are well trained as well. Of course, All of that is greatly enhanced by having an emergency operations center. When the council ultimately approved the new Civic Center meeting hall space, that entire building is being built from the ground up, so it can be converted to an emergency operations center, both for short-term use and for long-term use if necessary. What we've learned from other places that have had particularly large-scale disasters is that the EOC continues to function for days or weeks. And essentially one of the major shortcomings of our current EOC closet area is that it's in the police department. And essentially cordoning that area off and precluding the public from being in that area would not be very helpful in the days and weeks following a disaster.
Closet area?
Sorry, that just slipped out.
No, it's a little, Harry Potter under the stairs-ish there.
And if you have any doubts that our new Civic Center site will have a tremendous amount of high-tech stuff in it, just simply take a look at the conduits that are going into that foundation there. I don't think there's a square inch of sand that doesn't have a conduit running over it there. So we're going to have a lot of interconnectivity in that building. It ultimately will be able to function in a variety of very flexible patterns, so we're very excited about that.
Yeah, and speaking of the closet area, I spent 16 weeks in the Citizens Police Academy in that room. And, it just thinking about, having to spend days in that room activated as an EOC, this new space is just going to be wonderful.
It will really serve the community well. The other thing that we learned in dealing with other communities was it's not only our own staff that need to be in an EOC, especially for extremely large events. Staff from other law enforcement agencies, other firefighting agencies, and other emergency responders, or even sometimes service providers, PG&E, water service companies, all need an ability to move in and out of that space without sort of compromising its effectiveness. So that's ultimately going to be a real great step forward here.
One of the EOC activations that I was involved had 12 agencies and 60 people.
Yep.
And it ran 24 hours a day, 5 days. And you needed to have the facilities to bring new people in, new crews, swap out, have other areas where you could brief the people that are coming on and debrief the ones that were going off. So very important.
This goal also includes the use of technology to help with public safety. While public safety we do spend more resources on than anything else, these technology things ultimately extend the reach of our personnel. One of the particular items is an automated license plate reader, which is set to deal with stolen cars or felonies or other things. When those enter the city and they actually are picked up by an automated license plate reader, it gives dispatch the ability to figure out who's here and to send personnel out to deal with that. Combined with video cameras, we can get a read on which direction they're going, what the color of the vehicle is, and some other items as well. So we're continuing to actually locate those facilities here. As you might imagine, getting on poles, especially if, for example, the city doesn't actually own those poles, because the best place to put these automated license plate readers are at the entries to the city before we have 2 or 3 lanes of traffic to ultimately cover. When you have only a single lane, it's one license plate reader can do the trick there. So we're continuing to work with our partners to do that, and have gone through the process of evaluating 30 different sites and working on actually getting some of those installed. We've also installed mobile license plate readers, both on patrol vehicles and on maintenance vehicles, so that as those scan the street, we've picked up many a stolen car which has been abandoned on our streets that would have otherwise sat there for weeks or months before it was rediscovered and returned to its property owner. So we continue to make good progress on disaster preparedness and public safety. If all those things weren't enough, we did a little work on downtown during the last couple of years. You can see the primary action areas up there, that everything from having a steering committee to making sure that parking, circulation, city catalyst sites were all appropriately used. So what did we get done in the last couple of years? We issued a request for proposal, interviewed and selected outreach consultants. We convened a 19-member steering committee, which had 8 public meetings itself. We developed a community outreach program, which was approved by the council in August of 17. And then we had one of the largest outreach programs the city has ever conducted, including 5 neighborhood meetings, 2 community workshops, online outreach, pop-up events, walking tours, and dozens of presentations to community groups. Over 2,000 people directly participated in the process in one way or another, some more than others. And we ultimately came up with a series of priorities that the community found most important, with the top of that being things like parking, community character, and open space, And so those items ultimately guided council deliberations as they went through the process of listening to and reacting to all of that public feedback. Now, one of the tricky things was that not all of that feedback aligned perfectly. Not every single person in the community wanted exactly the same thing. Many of the things that people wanted actually contradicted each other. So part of that balancing process was to evaluate these things in detail. Ultimately, the council approved the downtown plan in January of 2018. And that included, right off the top, over 1,000 new spaces for parking will be constructed to replace what's there and to actually address the new uses that are being put into the plan. Open space, over 3 acres of new open space, including Stockman's Park, over 130-room hotel, retail around Blacksmith Square, space for cultural facilities, including a black box and science center, and housing for 130 workforce rental units. They then directed staff to begin implementation of that. You as a council told us in January that you wanted to begin to actually implement the various pieces of this. And so starting with the open space, ultimately the council, with this document and with documents that were approved in January as well, gave an easement, traded the easement with the Stockmans, essentially to allow the housing to move to this side and locking in the park area you see on that diagram. And they approved the final design for landscaping and the Stockmans Park in September. Moving on to the hotel, the council approved the entitlements for the hotel at the location that was shown on the diagram there in September of 2018. And ultimately, on parking, council directed that staff work through a number of interim parking solutions as we begin the construction. So you'll see that beginning actually very early this year, we began to make temporary improvements to the old Lucky site to make sure that that area will support businesses during the construction period. Again, in September, you approved the L Street parking garage, more than 500 new spaces that would be located at that particular location. Those items are just a sort of a highlights of what we've been doing in the downtown. You all, on almost a meeting-by-meeting basis, are taking additional steps as we move forward. For example, your item on the housing DDA will return to you before the end of the year as another important step in the overall balanced program that you came up with. Finally, innovation and economic development was the sixth of the council's goals. Up there at the top, we continue our support for iGate and the Switch. We opened the doors to its new facility on 2nd Street, over 16,000 square feet. There are 20 current resident startups. And just to give you a sense of how successful this has been, in the 10 companies that have graduated and gotten venture capital, because a lot of businesses have actually just graduated and grown slowly, the more of the service type businesses. But those who have generated the venture capital have received more than $65 million of angel and venture capital and have directly created over 250 jobs working for those companies alone. That's in addition to the companies which have simply outgrown the space but didn't get venture capital, since the reporting on them is a little sketchier. So a tremendous addition to the community just on the incubation side. In addition, essentially creating the space to have the trainings, to have the interactions, and then working with our regional partners to really create and enhance our entrepreneurial opportunities here in the Tri-Valley, I think has moved the needle in a way that's unusual for a local government to be both in this space and to actually be doing it well and cost effectively. So tremendous progress being made at the Switch. In addition, 4 key industries were identified for Livermore as we looked at what our core competencies were and where we could grow moving forward as far as innovation. They had to do with advanced manufacturing, transportation, professional, scientific, and technical services, and retail, hospitality, and tourism. In addition, we created 2 videos to market Livermore as an attractive destination for knowledge workers, including a cultural and lifestyle, and tech and innovation. And those are particularly interesting and fun to take a look and sort of move forward with what actually Livermore is all about. On workforce development, we had seasonal hiring fairs, a variety of them, and a variety of items where we bring workers, both attracting and developing the workforce, to connect our workers with our businesses locally that ultimately need that. Tourism attraction and promotion. We identified partners in developing our shopping guides, including the Wine Growers Association, Livermore Downtown, and the outlets, and then ultimately came up with an overall program to make sure that people know about us. Now, business attraction is another item, and we helped relocate or help local business either relocate to Livermore or expand. Gillig relocated in June of 2017, and since then Toyota Materials Handling was added new to Livermore. FM Industries, which is an advanced manufacturing, is expanding here in Livermore. Drexel Meyer is new to Livermore, and Lamb Research, and they do advanced manufacturing, and they're expanding here. In addition, not listed on there, is Tesla, which moved its R&D and warehousing and some other operations, leasing more than 1 million square feet of warehouse space in the Oaks Logistics Center. And Toyota Material Handling is actually the nation's largest supplier of forklifts. Essentially 1 out of 5 forklifts in the entire nation are Toyota. On the retail and service sector, there's also been a lot of new businesses during the last couple of years that your staff has ultimately facilitated, incentivized, or helped show up. And out at the outlets, we've got Carlisle, which is the women's fashion area. Homes to Sweet is near Costco. Francesca and Doctors are both out at the outlets. And Joya Yoga is a yoga studio on South M and 2nd Street. Turning to restaurants, we've got Steam House, which is a coffee shop on 2nd Street next to Joya Yoga. Mel's Diner, a rock and roll themed diner in the Trader Joe's Shopping Center. And Range Life on Railroad Avenue, just off of Livermore Avenue. Beach Hut on 1st Street near the Vine Theater. Bank Vault on South Livermore. On Caraway Indian Cuisine on Vasco in Springtown. So overall, I'm extraordinarily proud of the work that your staff has been doing during the past 2 years. We've made a significant progress on each of your goals. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Questions?
Why does it say independent on that bottom left picture?
It doesn't when you look at the screen. That's a figment of your imagination.
I see.
It was actually a much longer set of words that was actually stolen from another place. But yeah, we noticed that too this evening. And sort of, so you see your image up there is without the extra words added.
Got it.
Subliminal.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So not a question, but it's every time that you report out on this, I'm always just impressed with what you and the staff have done. And you're being up here, we do this and that and everything else, and it's times like this when you just see just the breadth of what we all deal with, and I think you guys just do a fantastic job.
Yeah, I would echo that. The other thing that occurred to me is that 2 years ago when we set these goals and priorities, we didn't get very specific, but it's up to you and the staff.
Just go off and do stuff.
Yeah,
right?
to go off and do stuff and to create the specific milestones that get us to the goals that we've set. And I think it's remarkable the detail that you've provided to us and the attention to that and and how you're moving forward with all these things to make the larger goals and the priorities a reality. So I think it's wonderful. I mean, all the hard work.
Yeah,
what you guys do.
Also, just we talk about the homelessness, and it always seems like such an intractable problem. And just echoing what Councilmember Carling said, you came up with some very specific things that actually look like they're moving the needle and helping quite a bit. And something that is so vague and hard to get your arms around. I mean, we're doing good things.
Well, I think the key is to giving good direction, or some direction, and giving staff the tools and the inspiration that they need, and then get out of their way. Just get out of their way and let them do the job. I mean, we tell them where we want to get to, and then get out of the way and let them get there.
Well, and the other ingredient is having a great staff, too.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we can praise staff enough for this, for every one of you and those who work for you and in every capacity. I've just been so impressed in 2 years here. It's incredible what we've been able to move forward because there's a lot of people spending a lot of hours doing a lot of stuff, even when we aren't very specific about where it should be going. I thank you for clarifying it for us along the way and making it happen.
And I want to echo everything, but also add you don't get this level of results and the detail that you're taking this to without a staff that truly cares. So if y'all were just clock punchers and said, okay, well, this addresses their goal, we'll throw something at them and, see if it sticks, that none of that's there with this. I mean, the level of detail and again, just the amount of work that's done and the care that's put into this really shows that staff has their heart in it. And that's what impresses me the most. You don't get the accomplishments that you've achieved over the past 2 years without a level of really putting yourself into the roles and caring and taking pride about what's happening around town. So thank you very much for that.
And it would be different if this was all linear, but it's not. I mean, all of this was done in the face of a great deal of controversy, whether it was manufactured or not. There was a lot of trying to convince people that this is the direction that they wanted to go. And this wasn't easy. It was a big lift, every one of these things. And then the thing that wasn't here, the Isabel Neighborhood Plan, which was a tremendous lift, took a tremendous amount of staff time.
In most communities, that would have been a singular achievement for an entire year or couple of years,
Yes.
and we didn't. It wasn't even listed on your goals.
And then on May 26th, everybody came into work and continued to forge ahead and do great work for the city. There wasn't like this big sense of defeat that, you just picked up and you just continued because you understood the importance of what we needed to get done in this city for the quality of life for the people in this community. And as Councilor Spadowski said, it's because there's a passion and a commitment to this city. You guys aren't just picking up a paycheck. You really care about this community. And I see that every time that we meet, every time we talk. And it's extremely gratifying for us to be able to work with people that have that level of commitment, because we're up here because we're committed to this community. And we are all pulling together, we're all working together with the community's best interests at heart. We're certainly not in it for the money up here. We're here because we care about this community.
And you do have a very gifted staff up and down the organization across all of the departments. You'll find some of the best in the business in those departments, and with clear direction and the resources to accomplish things, that's why they stay here, because we get to work on very interesting projects and make real progress on sometimes really tough stuff. So from that perspective, even incremental project on very difficult problems is a huge step forward. And so you see by just the presentation sampling there's a lot of good things going on in your organization.
And the other thing I think that points out, and it just also illustrates that the passion you guys have, is that you don't have a large staff. This is an incredible amount of stuff with a very small group, very efficient.
And with that, we've got a couple more presentations.
Well, did you want to take a quick break? Okay, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break here, and we'll be right back. Okay, good evening and welcome back to the second installment of the October 8th meeting of the Livermore City Council. We just completed the City Council priorities and goals update, and it's amazing how much stuff that we've gotten done in the recent past. Now we're moving on to the City Emergency Management and Disaster Preparedness Program update from Herbert Cole.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. My name is Herbert Cole, and I'm the Emergency Manager for the City of Livermore. I'm here tonight to present an update on the city's Emergency Management and Disaster Preparedness Program. Tonight's report will focus on expanded use of technology, improved citywide disaster preparedness, and increased efforts to ensure our staff and community readiness. In March, staff began an internal assessment to align the Council's disaster preparedness and public safety priorities with the American National Standards Institute Emergency Management Accreditation Program Emergency Management Standard. The Emergency Management Accreditation Program process develops safer communities through measurable standards of excellence and promotes best practices to ensure a sustainable and effective emergency management program. EMAP, as it's known, is a tool for continuous improvement, ensured government compliance, and increased overall effective emergency management. A comprehensive emergency management program is comprised of 4 key elements: hazard mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Together, these 4 interrelated elements make up the emergency management cycle and are the foundation upon which the Council's disaster preparedness goals and priorities are being implemented. In May, 20 staff attended a multi-day session at the California Specialized Training Institute, California Office of Emergency Services in San Luis Obispo. Staff were able to learn, practice, and update skills necessary to run the city's Emergency Operations Center. As Mark alluded to earlier, 35 staff have been trained in EOC operations, and we will continue to send staff annually. In September, 4 staff attended a multi-day public information officer training at CSTI. The focus of the training was on skills necessary to run the city's joint information system during emergency operations. In addition, FEMA grant-funded training opportunities are offered throughout the year, and staff are made aware of these opportunities to enhance and update their emergency management skill set. Brown bag lunch presentations for staff were scheduled throughout 2018. Each month, a new topic was presented to help staff learn to mitigate against, prepare for, respond to, and recover from disaster. These presentations have been well attended, and we are planning on offering them again next year. To meet both federal and state requirements for staff emergency management training, the City of Livermore instituted required NIMS-SIMS compliance training. All city employees are required to complete the training every 2 years or within 90 days of being hired by the city. To date, approximately 80% of the city employees have completed the required training. The training ensures compliance with state and federal regulations that impact the city's access to federal grant monies. On September 6th, the city participated in the largest emergency management exercise of its type ever held. Over 2,500 people throughout 12 Bay Area counties opened 14 emergency operations centers and 7 disaster shelter sites. The City of Livermore activated the EOC and simulated opening 3 shelter sites in cooperation with our partners at the Livermore Valley Joint Unified School District, the Livermore Area Recreation and Parks District, Lawrence Livermore National Labs, and the American Red Cross. On July 16th, EOC staff participated in a 3-hour emergency operations plan review. This annual training provides EOC staff an opportunity to review and update the city's emergency operations plan. During the Yellow Command Mass Care and Shelter exercise, Viochi Software, which is a program that we bought last year, enabled the city to activate the EOC, coordinate with our jurisdictional partners, and to support emergency operations in the field. The EOC in a Box concept was first deployed on September 6 during the Yellow Command exercise. EOC in a Box contains the necessary computers, printers, power, and networking hardware, allowing for rapid EOC setup, streamlined network configuration, and expanded incident support options. And planning. So we've been really busy on the planning side. As we talked about earlier, we've completed the emergency operations plan, the local hazard mitigation plan, and a severe weather plan. Currently in progress, we're working on our public information plan, which will support our joint information system and our joint information center, which is coordinating our messaging with all of our local jurisdiction partners and the county during times of emergency. We're also planning on our continuity of government plan. We're working on that. That's in the planning stage. The mass care and shelter plan, which is in planning stage with the county. And then our debris management plan, which we're planning for now. With regard to community engagement and preparedness, one of the things that we've really focused on in the last year is social media engagement. We've begun to push out messages from the National Weather Service, or anytime that there's like a wildland fire scare or information that needs to go out regarding weather, we will push that out. We're also pushing out training messages using our social media. Community Emergency Response Team is still offering training 2 times per year. The CERT volunteers are a critical component of the city's emergency response capability. We're also going to begin focusing on amateur radio. There is an EOC radio room, and when all else fails, amateur radio is really the only communications mode that has proven to be resilient enough to get the message through. When we lose all power and everything, the ham radio operators are the ones that can get the message through, so we will start focusing on them in the next year. We will be offering National Weather Service Storm Spotter training again this year. That'll be on October 24th. And we continue to offer free public quarterly preparedness presentations at the library. And with regard to public events, we've made several presentations with homeowners associations throughout the city. Development and maintenance of a comprehensive emergency management program is a dynamic and complex process with many interrelated activities. As noted in this presentation, staff is making progress in a number of areas and will return to council with another update in the spring. Available for questions?
Questions? Councilor Carling?
Yeah, when I was at the League of California Cities meeting a few weeks ago, one of the things I thought was interesting is, and I don't remember the community, but they offered CERT training in Spanish. Do we do that?
Not at this time.
The reason they do it was to try to integrate the Hispanic population more intimately into the city and get more of their engagement. So I don't know if that's a possibility, but I think we ought to think about it.
Councilor Spadowski?
Yeah, this is another example of the council saying, hey, we think we're a little bit behind on our emergency management. You could use some training, and then bam. Again, another example. This is great. This is beyond where I thought we would be, and meeting the expectations of making sure that we're prepared. Even put together a pretty snazzy logo there for the emergency management. Livermore with the. Is that the first time you've used that? I don't recall seeing that before.
We've used it in the past.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that in a presentation though. So no, great job. Again. This is something that we identified as a shortcoming. I think we were talking about this after the floods, or there was something that happened where we're just like, boy, we better get our act together, and I think we're there. So thank you very much. Also looking forward to the continuity of government plan. I know some people get a little, we got to make sure we get the word out there. They get a little nervous. It's like, oh, is this some kind of shadow government you have to appoint, or name, alternates in case, it's like, no. It's just to make sure that, everything's fine in case of a pretty big disaster.
Yeah, I had one thought. I mean, first of all, this is really great progress from when we, said we more than a little bit behind. I mean, like we had to start almost from zero. But so this is great progress. I was just wondering, you go through the training, but have you considered looking for opportunities where our key staff members actually participate in real EOC operations?
So we are planning to do an EOC activation for a planned event here within the next few months, and that will give the staff the opportunity to come in, sit down, and work through an EOC activation.
Well, that's not exactly what I meant. I didn't mean a drill. I mean, EOCs get opened all the time. Have you thought about actually participating in a real one, a real event?
So there's two things going on. They're being loaned to a place that had a disaster, because I don't want one just to practice. And then the other is actually doing a real operation of our EOC during a scheduled event, a large, essentially a parade is what we're going to be doing it at, to basically deal with the people and the movement and all of those things. But that's an interesting question of essentially loaning folks to an operational, in other words, for example, the equivalent of sending them to Santa Rosa for a few days or a week. So that's
or something. But I mean, what I'm saying is that these things do get activated, and it's one thing to be in a simulation. It's another thing to actually be there. And I was just suggesting that, that some of the key staff members look for an opportunity to at least observe what really is going on.
Interesting concept.
I just want to say thanks for documenting your short time here, documenting the efforts and the results that not many knew about. I think it's going to be an eye opener for many who may be watching this on TV tonight to see just what is going on in regards to emergency operations here in town, and appreciate the update and the thoroughness of it.
You mentioned the importance of amateur radios, and one of the justifications for the East Bay Regional Communications System, which is an interoperative system for 33 different agencies now, where we can all talk to each other. But during the Oakland firestorm, 3 of my colleagues at the Water District went to Oakland. They were amateur radio operators, and that was the only way that they could move thousands of firefighters around, is each one of them was on one of the 3 hills, and that was the only way they could talk to the different departments. Was for 24 hours they moved these firefighters around because there was no other way to communicate with them. And now, of course, we have e-bricks, but you grab whatever resources you can to mitigate a disaster. So good to keep all your options open. So thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? Great, thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, and Claudia Young is back up with the homeless strategies. Oh.
So good evening, Mayor and council members. Livermore, like most cities in the Bay Area, are having to deal with the issue of housing shortage with high-priced homes and homelessness. Homelessness is one of the council's priorities, and this issue affects everyone in the community at all levels. The presentation provides an update on our homeless prevention efforts and resources available. Hopefully, this information will help you to better understand the issues our city is facing. So, causes for homelessness. In 2014, Mayor Marchand hosted a homeless summit with the public, local leaders, and service providers. The summit highlighted and addressed the growing concerns surrounding homelessness. There was a need for additional information, which resulted in a comprehensive survey in the fall of 2015. The survey was intended to capture a clear picture of homelessness in Livermore. There were 129 completed surveys, of which 117 respondents responded that they were homeless. So the report showed the causes that were noted for homelessness, and I do want to say that most of the respondents did answer more than one of these, but 33% cited losing their job, 23% cited divorce or separation, 18% cited alcohol or substance abuse, 13% illness, medical or mental health issues, and 12% cited family or domestic violence. So to the mayor's point, that it's happening to, it can happen to any one of us, and it is happening to people that are working. This definitely shows in that data. So the number of homeless in Livermore. Our Alameda point-in-time count of 2017 was a comprehensive count of local homeless individuals. It occurs every 2 years and has been instrumental in identifying the number of sheltered and unsheltered individuals in the county and provides detailed information on each person's experience. In 2017, it was the first time that the county provided data on the individual cities. So for Livermore, they cited 243 individuals were homeless. Of the 243, 102 individuals were sheltered. So sheltered are persons that reside in emergency shelter or transitional housing. And 141 individuals were unsheltered. And unsheltered under the federal definition is persons sleeping in places not meant for habitation. So this would include living in cars. The next point in time count is set for 2019. Staff is inquiring to the county to understand if we can piggyback on their consultant to see if we can get more detailed information specifically for the city of Livermore. So segments of homelessness. Homelessness has varying segments and subpopulations that require a tailored approach. This is a list of many of the different segments. So you'll see families, you'll see youth, working poor, people with mental health and behavioral or physical barriers, housing insecurity, and alcohol and substance abuse. So the homeless problem is growing, and the resources and responses falling short. Like Mark said, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. This slide is to give you a sense of the different homeless service categories. So we have housing, navigation, and case management, homeless prevention, and homeless prevention is becoming really key for us as we're trying to stop the bleeding from both ends. We don't want people to fall into homelessness because once they fall into homelessness, it then takes so much resources to get them back into permanent housing. So if we can stop it from one end and then also deal with those that are already out and are homeless, that's really ideal. There's temporary, transitional, and emergency shelters. There's safety net services, which are specific to housing, health, safety, and food. There's basic needs, which is bathrooms, showers, and laundry. And I do have to say that our homeless survey, this was something that did come up and was highlighted in the survey that our homeless folks really wanted to prioritize. And there's outreach and resource referrals and health and sanitation services. So our Livermore Housing First strategy. The Housing First strategy focuses on building permanent housing that is supportive. Permanent housing means the resident can live without a time limit. Supportive housing includes wraparound services to ensure that the residents are able to live stable and productive lives. So supportive housing would include establishing health, mental health, or ongoing case management to make sure that they stay in their units. We identified strategies and a need to create, acquire, and secure new permanent supportive units that targeted unsheltered homeless population. There was a need for focus on veterans, families with children, chronically homeless, and those with disabilities. As Mark mentioned earlier, we have 9 new housing projects in the pipeline. Of those 9 new housing projects, there's 437 new affordable rental units. And there's an estimated 61 units specifically for homeless. These will be deeply affordable at 30% of the area median income or rent that shall not exceed a person's annual income above 30%. So an example of a family of 4, their income would not be higher than $31,300. Currently in our program year for 2018-19, we're currently funding many homeless specific programs. You can see in the green, there's housing and shelter services at $480,000. So this includes our tenant-based rental assistant programs, the shelter rehabilitation, case management for foster youth that are falling into homelessness, our outreach services, and also Tri-Valley Haven counseling and shelter programs. We also have $94,000 that goes into outreach, so that's specific outreach to our homeless folks. So this would be abode services and also our 211 information referral. We fund $15,000 of food services, and I do want to say this does not include Open Heart Kitchen. So specific for homeless, the $15,000 includes Tri-Valley Haven and the Maryland Pantry. Sorry, the Tri-Valley Haven Pantry and the Maryland School District Pantry. And under medical and mental health services, we fund $10,000, and this is for Tri-City Health Street Medicine Outreach, which partners with Abode to go out there and provide some medical services. And sometimes they do blood pressure checks. Sometimes they do HIV tests. So it does involve a lot of health services that people would otherwise not access. This year, the county put out an RFP for immediate impact funds for unsheltered homeless. Livermore took the lead to apply for $100,000, and this was for Livermore, Pleasanton, and Dublin. We selected CityServe of the Tri-Valley to provide case management and emergency motel vouchers. The funds were allocated as followed. Livermore received $50,000, Pleasanton $25,000, and Dublin $25,000. In addition to that, we have formed a homeless task force. The core group includes our police department liaison staff, our human services staff, and our homeless providers. And what we do is we coordinate between other city departments as needed to more efficiently address the homeless in Livermore. We meet monthly to discuss any challenges, trends, and concerns specific to the homeless community. In addition to that, we're constantly researching best practices on programs, assessing homeless needs, gaps in services, and identifying regional resources and partnering with faith-based groups for solutions and to potentially pilot programs. Our homeless online portal is available to the entire community. So if you go to our website and you go to the tab that says How Do I and Report Homelessness, you'll be able to see this report homeless activity. You can do it anonymously, or you can leave personal information so we can contact you. And it has different options for you to report many things. So this is where you would report an encampment, or where you would report maybe you see somebody left some belongings, or maybe you see potentially a group of homeless folks. And what happens when you enter the information into the system is it automatically disperses to our police department, to our human services staff, and to our homeless outreach provider and neighborhood preservation. And what will happen is, depending on the nature of the activity, if it's a health and safety issue, then the police department will automatically address it. If potentially there might be some homeless clients that maybe we can outreach to, then our homeless provider will take that opportunity to outreach to them. So location is really important. If you're able to provide that, just be very specific. And then if it's an encampment issue, then we deal with that with our police department or public works as needed. I should say that the police department does want me to say that if there is any safety issues, they do want you to call 911 first. They don't expect you to go through this activity reporting system. So our homeless partners include our faith-based community, the school district, Everyone Home, who's our county continuum of care, Alameda County Healthcare for the Homeless, community-based organizations, Tri-Valley Wheels, Tri-Valley One-Stop Career Center, and Las Positas College Homeless Outreach Liaisons. Our faith-based community does offer a lot of different services. We have Shepherd's Gate. They offer residential program for women and children. Aruka House offers transitional housing for men recently released from prison and or are homeless. Cornerstone Fellowship serves hot breakfasts, showers, and clothing for the homeless on the Vineyard Fellowship Church grounds on Monday mornings. Asbury United Methodist Church provides hot meals, showers, and laundry facilities 3 days a week. And the Livermore Homeless Refuge provides 25 beds in rotating warming stations during the winter. So currently, staff is working very closely with the school district. We found out that the school district currently has a count of 137 vulnerable students, of which 83 live in overcrowded doubled-up housing, 32 live in temporary shelters, 20 live in hotel or motels, and 2 are unsheltered. So strategies to address the vulnerable homeless families, we're working with the school district, teachers, social workers to identify homeless families. So one thing that we did this year during their annual health fair on August 15th, we had an opportunity to do a short 4-question survey. And we wanted to keep it short to make sure we could get as many participants as possible. So these were 2 of the 4 questions we asked. So what's your current living status? We had 53 people respond, and 50 of them said they're living in an apartment or house. Now, within that 50, they also checked off, 1 checked off unhoused, 7 were living with families or friends, 1 living in a car, 1 living in a shelter, and 2 in danger of losing their housing. Another question we asked was challenges in seeking services. So 20 were unaware of the eligibility of services, 19 had language barriers, 13 didn't answer, 8 selected other, 8 selected immigration status, and 4 selected concerned with losing their children. In addition to that, we asked for knowledge of services that assist with homelessness to see if the families were aware, and 29 said no, and 22 said yes, and 2 said no answer. And the fourth question was number of people interested in receiving homeless resources, and 30 of them answered yes and provided their information for CityServe to get a hold of to see if there's any resources available. So this was really encouraging. We realized that we need to do some education within the school system on what resources are available. So we're going to be working with the teachers and with the social workers to do various focus groups to get people informed on the different resources. So moving along, we also work with the Livermore-Amador Valley Transit Authority, or the WHEELS. In 2002, Livermore, or LAFTA, we'll say they provided 300 WHEELS bus tickets per month for low-income Livermore residents. So this was something that we negotiated with them. And the benefits over 16 years has been 57,600 rides. This provides low-income residents transportation to access appointments, employment trainings, and job search opportunities. So this is definitely one of those partnerships that has really gone a long way. I think initially everybody thought, oh, it's 300. Well, it ended up being 57,000 rides. So those are the types of partnerships we're looking forward to. Our local approach. So staff implemented the short survey within the school district, and we plan to do more to get a better feel of what's happening within the school district and within our families. We've engaged community partners to explore a safe parking program and develop hazardous waste solutions. So for the safe parking program, staff has engaged 4 faith-based groups to design a pilot program. Staff is researching program models in neighboring cities that have been successful and working through challenges and concerns, also identifying resources to support such programs. Such a pilot program will have a service model component that would require screening for participation and promote the goal of increasing income and obtaining permanent housing. So for this particular program, we really think that that's going to be the key. We definitely don't want to set up something that is going to be permanent. We want to be able to move people along. And so offering them services is really the key thing of that program. For hazardous waste solutions, we've engaged a nonprofit provider, their name is Block by Block, to assist with community biohazard waste removal. So this is something that they have in San Francisco, they have in Oakland, and the program has been very successful. So we're partnering with the business district and a couple of other departments to see if this is something that would work in our city. And then engaging the county and local partners to advocate and bring health programs to Livermore to address mental health, behavioral health, physical and dental health. So staff right now is engaging with Bay Area Community Services to assist with outreach and a clinical day program for individuals with mental health, behavioral, and substance abuse barriers. And this would not be limited to homeless folks, but they are interested in coming to our city and providing services. So we're definitely engaging with them. So key program elements that we're looking as we move forward. Like I said earlier, we're definitely looking at homeless prevention. This is going to be critical to assist the most vulnerable and to prevent further increase in homelessness and the need for resources. Supportive housing units. So this is something that is more recent, more new, and is being implemented. In the past, affordable housing developments did not carry this component, and you could say that that's why it was not as successful for homelessness. So this is really key, is adding those supportive services as you're building the units. And then just improving access to services, so continuing access to services and identifying gaps in services. In a regional approach with Pleasanton and Dublin, we're developing a regional grant funding approach to prioritizing safety net services, identifying gaps in services and streamlining funding to match needs, developing a regional approach for requesting funds from the county and or the state, and identifying immediate solutions that target the needs of various homeless segments. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much. Questions?
I have no questions here, but I just want to say thank you for that's a thorough and very sobering examination of homelessness here in Livermore, and it makes you wonder, non-specifically, what more can we do? It's just, as one of our priorities, I'd like to see us make a real meaningful dent in the population where we can. And so whatever you can help us discover when we have ways to do this, I really appreciate it.
I'll just make a comment that I thank you for the report. I'm glad, it seems like the last time I remember getting data like this, there seemed to be some lack of information about school children. And I'm glad that we were able to get at least some information in that regard, because I think that was a segment of the population that we missed the last time. So I appreciate reaching out to the school district and getting that information, because that's a critical part of our community that we need to take care of. Thank you.
Just a couple comments, or a comment and some questions. Great work, headed in the right direction. I think everything here is excellent, and I've made these comments in the past, I believe, and I'm glad to see progress towards a regional approach. Not that we should slough off any of our responsibilities. I think part of the problem is Livermore is we have all the services. I mean, we keep hearing from people, Livermore has all the services. It's what are the other cities doing? How does our program compare to them? And what can we do to help bring them up to speed with what we're doing? So I think starting to apply for grants, regionally, that's great. I almost think that, the higher funding levels should go to the other cities to help them catch up. But I know that we have a lot of the services here. Going back to the faith-based homeless assistance slide, you list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 faith-based organizations. Mm-hmm. Is that all that we have in town?
No.
So you're just highlighting the 5 there. I'm beginning to wonder if we need a survey of all of our faith-based organizations to see what services people are providing. Maybe there's churches that are doing things that we don't know about. Mm-hmm. Maybe there are organizations that would like to participate and partner with some of the other faith-based organizations. So anything that we can do to connect, because that's a goal of faith-based organizations, is to help people, and they could do a better job in some of these instances than we can.
Right. So for example, for my safe parking, it's not all of the faith-based groups there. There's a couple more that I did not mention. Sure. So one thing that I'm doing in the next couple of months is putting together kind of a homeless group for our community to be able to share the information and maybe meet quarterly or as needed to be able to share that information. Because you're right, a lot of the faith-based groups are doing things on their own as a part of their ministry. And one thing that I'm trying to do is kind of get my finger on the pulse of what they're doing, because they're always looking to do more. And I think what they need is just a little bit more direction from a program perspective, right, to understand what the need is. And so I'm working really closely with the faith-based groups in getting a comprehensive list of everybody to see if we can get the providers in the same room, the faith-based groups, and then strategize on how to better coordinate things, not duplicate services. And I think there's going to be many services that we're going to need that will be a really good fit for one faith-based group and maybe not for another. Yeah. And that'll be an opportunity to work through where does everybody kind of fit in the puzzle as we work together.
Yeah, it's kind of like a faith-based database or something. I don't know how to
Right.
word it, but just this, everybody in town. And it would be nice if it was, all 3 cities, have this list of every faith-based organization, what they're doing, I mean, it's a lot of work. I mean, you're going to have to, contact some of the ones that we have no interaction with,
Right.
but it would be great just to get them all together and say, hey, if you want to help out, here's what we need, or if you're providing it, we need to know so we can coordinate that between all groups. That's something that I've always wanted to see done, but
So I was able to get a pretty comprehensive list, at least to start with.
for Livermore or
For Livermore.
for Livermore, okay.
So that's going to be our starting point.
Yeah, and
get
then try
everybody
and
to
get
the
it
table.
into Pleasanton and Dublin, and because it can be cross-city, as we know. And just, you could have somebody providing services in Dublin that we just don't provide out here. So that would be that's a great thing to do. So thank you. Oh,
Excuse me.
Urenga.
Hi, I'm Eric Urenga, your Assistant Community Development Director, and Claudia and I work together. Here's my. Sorry, I just Now want
we
to
know who
add
you
because it's Claudia's been working really hard with the different faith-based groups, but in addition, our Vineyard 2.0 project, which includes a large service component. Both Claudia and Francis have worked with. Last meeting, I think we had 9 or 10 members of the faith-based community, and looked for ways to outreach to them, and each of them expressed really. You hit it right on the button. The faith-based community, it's their mission, it's their purpose to help. In this kind of situation, they've all expressed some deep interest and actually excitement about becoming involved in the project and helping us work to solve the homeless problem in our city. And so we have, it includes not only the Christian-based faiths, but also the Muslim community, Hindu community, as well as
Everybody.
Jews, all of them, and they've all have stepped up. We have an incredible city here, and it really is reflected in our faith-based community and their willingness to help solve this problem.
I drive by my daughter's elementary school, and there's a group that meets. I don't know if they meet there anymore, but in the gymnasium on Sundays. I mean, even groups. I'm talking everybody.
Right.
We make sure, because they are probably not well equipped because they're meeting in an elementary school gymnasium, but they may have volunteers and resources that they could partner with somebody else. So that's what I see as our role in making a large difference, is just connecting all the organizations, because we're not a one-stop shop for every problem, and we know this is a very complex problem. So it's getting the partners out there and coordinating our resources so we're not duplicating or missing anything, or having organizations that want to help that just need that little push to get them into the flow of things.
One thing I didn't include in my presentation, we also have a networking event that we started since I got here. And we rotate with Pleasanton and Dublin. And we do invite our faith-based groups, our providers, our commissions. We do a lot of outreach. And initially it started to just introduce staff, because there was new staff in all 3 cities.
Right.
And what it turned out to be was just this big networking event where people met each other, didn't realize such and such was doing this service, and it just turned into just coordinating and doing things better. And our providers have really, really, really liked that. And so we continue to do that. And the next one is going to be in Livermore in November.
Great. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Warner?
Yeah, I'd like to thank you for this very comprehensive report on your homeless strategies, and thank you for everything you're doing. I have a couple of thoughts. One thing along those lines, I don't know that the community really knows how much is being done, because there's a lot here. And I was going to suggest, I don't know, is this the basis for another special newsletter or something? But somehow we have to highlight it and let people know, because this is a phenomenal amount that is actually being done. I think that people see the issue, and they don't. That's easy for them to understand. I don't think they understand what you're doing. So I think that would be worth it. Another thought that I thought would be useful, maybe because I'm a technical type, but I I see we're beginning to get our arms around the problem of how to understand it. We had the surveys, and we have all of this information here. It may be helpful to have trend data over time. I mean, we're beginning to do it, and so what was it last year, the 2 years before, and I mean not just in the total numbers, but by segment. How many are utilizing what kind of services? So it's the number of people going through it, but also how much resources are being put into that area, so that we know what our total resource pie is and where is it going. And just as an example, to help try and get the arms around this, is we have on the early slide, you've got the number of homeless in Livermore, and it gives us some total numbers and statistics. And then later on, there's the data from the school district. And it's not clear to me whether those numbers in the school district are within the total, or they're different, or maybe they're only partly in. So I think it'd be helpful for me to just see how we segment everything and what the trends are over time. Because it's a lot of times we look at this at a point in time, and then it's kind of hard to see whether we're, as was mentioned earlier, are we making progress, and in some areas, and what's working, what's not working, what should we change. So, but again, thank you for this. It's a really very good work, and I think we need to let the community know more about it.
Again, great work. It's hard to believe that it was 4 years ago that I convened the first Mayor's Summit on Regional Homelessness. We had over 200 participants at that forum, and maybe it's time to do that again. As you know, I was a panelist at the Alameda County Forum that we did at the San Leandro Library a few months back, very well attended. And you're also part of the Alameda County Mayor's Conference work group that we do at each Mayor's Conference meeting, that pre-meeting. So there's a lot of work going on. Alameda County passed a measure, I think a year and a half, 2 years ago, to provide housing funds, low-income housing. And when it's all said and done, it was $500 million, was that the amount for that? $500 million bond? Mm-hmm. Okay. And the best guesstimates that I saw was that was going to produce perhaps 5,000 affordable housing units. And at one of the Tri-Valley Poverty Awareness Initiative meetings that I went to, the estimate was when the next round of Section 8 applications came in, they anticipated over 100,000 applications. And this $500 million bond is going to create maybe 5,000 housing units. So there's an extraordinary magnitude of need here. Last year, the Chronicle ran a study, or ran a survey on San Francisco. And San Francisco had spent, I believe it was $241 million on homelessness. An astonishing number. I mean, that's 200 times our entire budget, and they aren't even close to solving it. One of the things that I frequently talk about is, looking at this list, the Livermore Homeless Refuge rotates between 3 different churches. Mm-hmm. So I frequently count them as 3 rather than 1. But looking at your list and the addition of the Aruka House, there are 7 facilities in the Tri-Valley. There's 5 Tri-Valley cities. There are 7 facilities for the disadvantaged, the homeless, and the abused. All 7 are in Livermore. All 7. Now, there's need in every other city, but it goes back in the DNA of our community that we just are a very giving and generous community. And some of the public perception that the Vice Mayor alludes to is that there are some people who believe that because we provide the services, because we have access to these facilities, that we actually attract people that are experiencing homelessness. And we do provide the services, but there's no other city that's stepping up to meet that need. And I think it's just part of the strength of our faith-based community. Our Interfaith Housing Group oversees over 200 housing units for seniors. That's astonishing. That's nowhere else in the valley, and it just speaks to the caliber and the generosity and the kindness of this community. And I think that's what you hear tonight, is that how proud we are that this community will step up and look after those in need. So tremendous amount of work. As I said, maybe it's time we do another summit to make sure that we keep moving ahead and we keep everybody on board with this. Maybe we need to do another homelessness survey.
Well, I think I initiated that last time, didn't
Yeah,
I?
think so, yeah.
So what I was going to say, just building on what you said, is I would suggest that we just establish a regular cadence for these things, the summit, the surveys, and these other aspects of it. So that, rather than ad hoc, let's just say this, it's time. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And as I said, we're not looking at strategies to just put them in warehouses. We're looking for something that's a more permanent solution. Well, like the one on McLeod, that wonderful facility that we brought up on McLeod, where we converted into the small studios specifically to take people experiencing homelessness off the streets. So a lot of different strategies. I know that Oakland is using garden sheds. They're putting people up in garden sheds and tiny house sorts of things. But the main thing is, as you pointed out, it's easier to keep people in housing than try to house them after the fact, after they've lost housing. So a lot of the strategies that we're employing, I think that we continue to move ahead. And what's going to be key is to coordinate these efforts, and especially the need for the wraparound services, because that ensures their long-term success. So I certainly appreciate you coordinating the efforts with the other cities. I think that you've really taken the lead on that to bring everybody on board to make sure that we can continue to move ahead, because we understand how homelessness is a regional problem. It's not specific just to Livermore. It's throughout the region. So great.
So I was just thinking if I could be more specific on my earlier suggestion and turn it into a request of when could you come back with a proposed set of metrics so that we could track the trends over time?
So currently right now with the Bode Services, which is our outreach provider, I'm implementing some data metrics for them. So we've come to an agreement on what those data metrics are, and we're going to start moving forward. So I think we would need a little bit of time just to kind of build the numbers, but at the end of the next program year, I think we're going to have fuller data that I can present to you. Also with CityServe is doing a tremendous job in tracking everything that they're doing. And they will have a lot of that detailed information on, how much are we spending on this versus that, on families versus individuals. So I would say it probably would have to wait until the end of this program year, so at the end of June of 2019, so that we can have some really robust information to look at.
Oh, I was, I can understand that, to actually have the information. I was interested in how to think about what information we need.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. I think I'd also like to suggest that a few years ago we had a subcommittee on homelessness to work on the survey and everything. It might be worth doing that again, just so that we understand the data, we figure out what we ought to do. So I'd like, I don't know what the rest of you think, but it may be worth having such a subcommittee. We had one on finance, we've had one on downtown, but I think this one is worth at least an ad hoc for a little while, just to come back and just look at it in depth.
Just a question for the city attorney. Would that be something we would bring back, or since we're talking about homelessness right now, would this be an appropriate time to appoint a subcommittee?
The mayor, Mr. Mayor, as your role as mayor, you can create a subcommittee should you so choose. My only request is that you identify who the members are, the subject matter, and the duration.
Okay, let me think about that then, and But
Just come back next time.
okay, yeah. So we'll talk about that. Okay, very good. Thank you. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you.
that. So with that, I believe that gets us up to 7.0. No, not the committee reports. the committee reports and matters initiated. So it's Councilmember Coomber.
I'll make this real easy. I've attended a LAVTA board meeting, the board of directors for this month, and that was has it been it since the last council meeting. It's been a very slow couple of weeks for me.
All right. Councilmember Carling.
Yes, thanks. I mentioned earlier that I'd attended the annual meeting in Long Beach of the League of California Cities, and I always find those very educational for myself. And I think one of the interesting things is sort of listening to the comments and the discussion from other members, council members and mayors, city managers and so on from throughout the state. And obviously one of the, maybe not so obvious, but it's becoming obvious to me, is that one of the continuing themes that you hear about is housing. And I was particularly struck by a council member from Oroville, and she was commenting that nearly every council meeting, and Oroville is from her point of view, is a relatively poor city in Butte County, and yet they have the haves versus the have-nots there, just as I would characterize that here in Livermore. And the haves in Oroville don't want any housing for the have-nots. And I think I would characterize that's what's going on here. We heard it again tonight. I think that's what this referendum is all about. And the other thing that I guess that based on what Mr. Round said earlier, is I think they're conflating some things, the people that are pushing the referendum, conflating the hotel and the housing. If I remember correctly, we picked the location of the hotel before we ever discussed where the housing would go. And somehow, again, it was brought up tonight, was that if only the housing was on the edges, then the hotel would move to the west side. Well, that isn't true. That isn't what we decided. So I'm very disappointed in what's going on. And at least from my observation, we're talking about the haves versus the have-nots, and that really disturbs me in this community.
Thank you. Councilmember Spadowski.
Well, if Councilmember Carling hasn't watched the last council meeting yet, I encourage him to watch item 7, where I brought up a few of the similar issues, and that's what I'm going to do tonight. So there are a couple items that I'd like to point out. One is a request to the Independent directly that, I've noticed a trend over the years that people show up during the 3-minute public comment period, make their comments, and then leave. And then those comments are prominently featured in the articles in the Independent, followed by maybe 1 or 2 statements from council members, and then, as what happened in the last issue or the issue before that, a lengthy response from, in this case, David Rounds with the Friends of Livermore, with some of the same things that we heard tonight, basically a lot of misinformation. So if you are going to do that, I would request that you please accurately reflect staff's responses in the paper, and or contact staff or any one of us for a quote about the issue. Just leaving it for someone to basically be able to respond with inaccuracies and narratives that just don't match reality. I think that's just unfortunate that that's occurring. The other incident that's unfortunate and occurring in town is the rampant harassment from the petition signature gatherers. And I'm also equally dismayed that this is being downplayed by the Friends of Livermore. no attempt has been made to even address some of the blatant lying and harassment that's occurring. Actually, I should correct that. There was one attempt that I'm aware of after one of our council member spouses was followed out to her car, as we've mentioned before, I believe at that meeting, followed to her car and harassed by one of the signature gatherers. The driving force behind Friends of Livermore called her personally to apologize. And then Mr. Rounds was quoted in the paper as saying, this is basically a singular incident, downplayed the whole thing, and said that that person was let go. Well, we can confirm, or at least as I understand it, that person was not let go. We're still seeing her in the community, and it's not just this one person. Now people are posting online images and videos of the harassment, including people now going door to door and refusing to leave until they get a signature. Now, that's gutsy of them. This is Livermore, and people do.
Remember, Mr. Rounds also said that he wrote the scripts for the signature gatherers.
And that would be a very interesting script to see. Again, they're not very transparent. We don't have the script. You check Friends of Livermore website, at least the last time I checked, hadn't been updated in many years. In fact, they still have lines criticizing party homes for using paid signature gatherers for the original housing movement there on North Livermore. So it really is being glossed over. I would prefer not to write weekly letters to the Independent. I appreciate them publishing the letters. They've always been very fair in that respect. But if you're going to do this, at least have some common decency to admit that there's flaws in what's going on. Don't play the victim. And we heard comments from people, "You made us do this." And it's like, no, we didn't make you do anything. These people have had unprecedented access to staff, to us, throughout the years, vetting their concept, and we have outlined the flaws. So, to say that you're a victim in this case and we need to use paid protesters, that's just plain wrong. I mean, there's video out there. There's people taking images. People that I don't even know are posting these things online. And it's just these rampant examples of the harassment that apparently Friends of Livermore is okay with. So I just wanted to get that out there. It's been bugging me. This is, as I've told many people, way out of my comfort zone. I don't prefer to do this, but after working with a particular group for 3+ years on issues, and to see this go on and feel like all of our efforts to make things work, every effort that we've taken to include them and to figure out what would satisfy them in particular, and when I say them, it's basically barely plural because it's such a small group of people that are behind this. It's just insanely frustrating. So, don't know. I guess my rant is over.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Warner. Nothing. Okay. Matters initiated.
Nothing to add, and I think I've, as we went through this, I initiated a couple of things, so that I'm good.
Okay. Last Wednesday, I was part of a transportation forum. I was on the panel, quite a distinguished panel. Had Supervisor Scott Haggerty. We had Assemblywoman Catherine Baker, the Mayor of Pleasanton, Mayor of Dublin, the BART Board Director John McPartland, and myself. Narrated or was moderated by Nate Miley, and talking about just how complicated and how expensive the regional transit is, and how it really is regional, that we can't solve this ourselves. I was at the airport open house, which was extremely popular, but a gorgeous day, and the Wine Growers Association was out there, and just a great time had by everybody. And I've got a matters initiated from that, but today I was at the Alameda County Transportation Commission, had the 580, 680 report, our update on that, and we have in August there were 826,000 trips made on the express lanes along I-580. So they're very, very popular, and it's increased the volume of capacity on 580 by 30%. So yes, this absolutely does work. At the Planning Policy and Legislative Committee, we got an update on a number of issues going on in the state. We learned that Proposition 6, let me back up. So we got the pothole report from ACTC. This is actually the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and Livermore has some of the best roads in Alameda County. Very proud about that. But we have a pavement condition index of 76, which is actually pretty good. Most of the other cities were far below that. There's over 1,000 miles of poor and failing roads in Alameda County. So ours are in actually pretty good shape. However, if Proposition 6 passes, we're going to lose, we, the city of Livermore, will lose about $2 million per year in funds that we are currently spending on our local roads and streets and pavement. So we're getting the word out on that. As far as matters initiated, when I was at the airport, there's a lot of interest, a lot of folks excited about the airport, and I understand that we used to do the fuel sales at the airport, and ran the fuel sales for years. And I'm talking with some of the pilots out there. The fixed base operator actually ran out of fuel. And of course, one of the justifications for having the airport is in the event of an emergency, and we heard the importance of emergency preparedness, is the airport is a key link in bringing resources to the region in the event of emergency. But if planes are bringing in resources and they can't fuel up and leave, we get a whole stack of planes. Planes can't come back in because they can't leave. So I know that there are minimum standards that we have at the airport, and perhaps we need to revisit those minimum standards if our fixed-based operator that's taken over the fueling has run out of fuel. So I think this is something that we need to be concerned about.
So you'd like a written report back on that?
Sure, that'd be great. Okay. Anybody? Okay, good. Thank you. And is it whatever, however we need to modify the minimum standards for the airport, perhaps some direction on that. With that, there being any more, anything else for the good of the order? Okay, with that, meeting adjourned.